Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview Committee. I'm Councillor Paul Prentice. I'm chair of this committee. The Overview Committee undertakes pre-decision scrutiny of reports going to the Cabinet of the Council's policies, projects, budget and services. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. And if you're seated in the public gallery, you're very welcome. It's possible that the cameras may capture your image. And if you wish to avoid being filmed, it's recommended you just make a member of staff aware and they can direct you where to sit. We've also got present at this meeting Councillor Alan Baldock, who is leader of the council. And we've got Councillor Pip Hazelton as well, who is our cabinet member for housing. I don't see any others here at the moment. They're here to observe the debate as part of our early engagement before decisions are taken. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening, but should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at the Tower House car park. Members of the public, welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting, just using whatever non-disruptive methods you think are suitable. And this meeting is being minuted and recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. Pippa, do we have any apologies for absence, please?
We have an apology from Councillor Liz Harvey.
Thank you. And are there any substitutes this evening?
We don't have any substitutes tonight.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to hand over to Peter Davis, our Joint Chief Executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just before the meeting starts, I'd like to draw the committee's attention to 2 points for tonight's meeting. Firstly, this is a meeting of the Overview Committee. Overview is a non-decision-making committee that gives pre-decision scrutiny to council reports. Unusually, Overview is meeting ahead of Cabinet, who, in this instance, are also non-decision-making. The ultimate decision-maker is full council, of which you're all members. It's therefore important to remember that the discussion, debate and any opinions shared tonight are not a decision on the local plan at this stage. Even when full council meets in a couple of weeks, the decision put to you will be to go out to the final Regulation 19 consultation. You will not be agreeing to adopt the local plan at that meeting. Secondly, councillors are reminded to consider the advice previously shared to them by the monitoring officer. However, at this stage, with the publication in full of the draft Regulation 19 local plan and supporting materials, it is likely that, after your consideration of those reports, that you will be forming strong opinions on the local plan at this stage. That is fine and expected. That said, you will be hearing from members of the public tonight, you'll hear from officers, and you'll hear from each other. No doubt this debate will be a consideration as you move towards that final decision at full council in a couple of weeks. As such, it's important that you retain an open mind until that full council meeting. This does not stop you from having strong opinions on the plan, nor does it stop you changing your mind about how you feel about the plan as we progress from overview through to Cabinet and into full council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so we move straight into public participation. Should move into declarations of interest, shouldn't I, really? Sorry about that. Do we have any declarations of interest by members or officers? Councillor Auld first.
Thank you, Chair. I have an OSI in that I live adjacent to site W7 in the plan. I have a dispensation from the monitoring officer that allows me to partake and, if necessary, vote in any issues related to the local plan at this meeting or at the council. Thank you.
Did I see Councillor Heaver?
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got two voluntary disclosures. One relates to W4 land at Brooklands Farm. I'd like to disclose that for about 2 years, including time I wasn't a councillor and time I was a councillor, I've had multiple interactions, correspondence, conversations with the community campaign group Save Brooklands Farm. And whilst I share many of their concerns and even allowed them to put some posters up on my garden fence, since being elected, I've made it entirely clear to all of the people I've spoken to and corresponded with that I have to keep an open mind as a councillor, that I have to take all evidence and data into account before coming to a final decision, and I'm quite happy to provide documentary evidence of that if challenged. My second one is a slightly unexpected one. It relates to the email that all members received from Councillor Auld today at about noon today. The opening paragraph, in case members haven't seen it, is he feels obliged to alert you to a serious development that could pose significant risks to the local plan and to the reputation of this council. This relates to the continued inclusion of the site known as Milton Manor Park, C14. This 14-acre site was formerly owned by ex-councillor Louise Jones-Roberts. The reason I mention this specifically as a declaration is that before being a councillor, I worked as a journalist. This is one story I investigated because it was of extreme interest to me at the time. I received a number of intimidating letters from Miss Louise Jones-Roberts' solicitors, a firm called Carter Ruck, that will be very familiar to anybody who's ever worked as a journalist. I became aware of the story and the very disquieting story, and apart from my disquiet about the email from Councillor Auld and whether this can be temporarily excluded from our discussions, if we are going to discuss it, if it is on the agenda for this evening, I'm seriously concerned about the levels of partial privilege any of us will get and whether we're going to have legal action taken against us by Carter Ruck or indeed anyone else. So I'm sorry to have to bring that up, Chair, but it's a very serious concern.
Thank you. Could you expand on the voluntary disclosure you mentioned?
The voluntary disclosure is that I have an involvement in this site before I was a councillor, that I worked on this as a journalist and published a story about it and received legal letters from Ms. Louise Jones-Roberts' solicitors. So I would feel, intimidated about mentioning anything about it without being very clear if I've got privilege or we're totally open as a council to be able to talk about it and discuss it.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Heaver, you saying that this would affect your decision making, that you wouldn't be able to retain an open mind on a local plan because of that aspect of it?
No, not at all. I'm just explaining that I had an interest in this issue before I became a councillor, and I wouldn't feel happy discussing that particular site in this meeting.
Okay, so I think for the record then, we're saying Councillor Heaver, in a former or current role, was a journalist that had looked into one aspect of the local plan.
And I think and obviously we're discussing the whole local plan, draft local plan tonight. And I think if that issue comes up, then we can make it convenient for you to leave the chamber, and we'll find an opportunity if that issue comes up tonight. But I'll just take the other declarations of interest. Councillor who have we got next? Councillor Mellish, thank you.
By comparison, it's very minor, Chair. Just to let people know that one of my siblings, my brother, is actually a resident on Beacon Road on HB4, and his property actually backs onto that development we'll be talking about.
Any others? Councillor Thomas, I saw.
Because councillors brought it up, we worked with Jones Roberts as councillors when she was a councillor, so I don't know if to declare that. So that's it, declared.
Councillor Stockley, is that a similar thing? Yeah. Any other declarations of interest? I'll bring Peter in, actually.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've just checked, and councillors tonight will be operating under qualified privilege. So long as what they're saying isn't without malice, and because this is a topic of local interest, then they're able to freely share their opinions and views, so long as it doesn't have malice or is dishonest. Thank you.
Okay. That's all the declarations of interest from officers and members. We will move on to our public speakers. So I'm going to be fairly strict on timings tonight, just because we've got 16 public speakers and you're all very welcome, and I'm very I'm glad to see there's so much engagement on this. But because there's 16 of you, I just need to be fair to everyone. And so I will be fairly strict on timings after that 3 minutes. So it's not me being strict for the sake of being strict. It's just that we're going to have a long meeting, and that's absolutely fine. But I want to be fair to everyone who's come along tonight and wants their opportunity to speak. I hope that's okay with everyone. I think without further ado, I will invite our first public speaker to come over, and that's Michael Ebbs, please.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. I'd like to speak to you about Policy C10 Merton Park, or, as local residents know it, Wincheap Fields and Orchards. It's a proposed allocation for major development of around 2,000 homes, sports facilities including a football stadium and commercial development. This would have a devastating impact, changing the area from an agricultural landscape of orchards and fields to an urban one. After dark, it will also be highly damaging to the night sky because of street lighting and floodlighting of the sports facilities. This is an area that might look suitable for development on a two-dimensional plan, but in reality, it's a highly visible rising ground forming part of the southern slope of the Stour Valley. This open landscape enables panoramic views of the city and cathedral in their rural setting, and when viewed from the opposite side of the valley, for example, Neil's Place and Kent University, it is a vitally important part of the rural backdrop to the cathedral. What is at stake here is not just attractive views, but the integrity of the Cathedral World Heritage Site. The relationship between the cathedral and its rural valley setting is recognised in UNESCO's description of the cathedral. The Merton Park development would seriously harm that relationship and therefore the cathedral's outstanding universal value. In such cases, a heritage impact assessment should be undertaken in accordance with the UNESCO guidelines. The Council does not appear to have done this, even though Historic England has advised you that the likely harm to the historic environment and the lack of a demonstrable evidence base may have implications for the soundness of the plan. The proposal to access such a large development primarily from Hollow Lane is vague, unproven and unacceptable. It is also confusing. For example, the plan states that part of Hollow Lane will be made one way, but does not say which way. If it is one way, then another road would have to cater for traffic flowing in the opposite direction. Which road is this? Is it Homersham? And what are the implications for residents' living conditions, on-street parking and access to homes in Hollow Lane? In any case, neither road is up to the appropriate standards in Kent design, and there's been no information on the impact on the junctions with Wincheap, which we fear will not be able to cope. A route for construction traffic has not been identified, but if it was Hollow Lane and Homersham, the impact on these residential streets over a 15-year or so construction period would be completely unacceptable. For these reasons, we consider that the site is not suitable for development and that it should instead be recognised and protected as a valued landscape. Thank you.
But yes, Thomas Crowther, please. Thomas Crowther is the next speaker.
Is it on? Cool. Good evening, councillors. My name is Tom and I was born and have lived in Wincheap since the year 2000. I feel proud to say that I come from Kent, and I'm prouder still to say that I come from Canterbury. The reason for this pride is because I've grown up in a city which is rich in history and has a wild rural landscape that gives me a sense of intense place and belonging. The proposed Merton Park development, however, gives me an intense feeling of anger and sadness. Sadness because the plan has no respect for heritage or wildlife that is abundant in this area. And anger because the development stands to destroy the only remaining green space in the south of Canterbury. I am here to tell you that this local plan is not sound and that the Merton Park development should be removed from the plan. I am here to talk for people like me who rely on this valuable green space daily. The orchards and fields that would be bulldozed are vital for recreation for people of all ages, and the footpaths and trackways that wind through the fields provide space for people to walk and keep physically fit and healthy. They provide a space for people to connect to wildlife on their doorstep, and being able to do this is important for the mental health of Wincheap residents. How wonderful that I can stand on a hill that has held views of Canterbury for thousands of years. This hill, this view, this orchard is a time machine that allows you to see Canterbury through the eyes of Roman soldiers, pilgrims, and the original settlers, the Canty tribe. I want young people to have the same opportunity to access this beautiful green space that I have had growing up here, to play manhunt and hide and seek in the orchards, to play football in the fields, and to be able to run free in the rural fringe on the edge of the busy city. These are the happy memories of my childhood, and they are memories shared by thousands. To this green heart of Canterbury, there is no substitute that you can offer. No alternative space that can provide anything near what this space can. This is Canterbury's backdrop. This is Canterbury's rural setting. This space is precious. We have UNESCO views of an ancient city. The plan talks about viewing corridors. Why would we want a narrow viewing corridor when we already have panoramic views of Canterbury and the city? What will people see instead? 2,000 houses, roads and cars where people used to walk, and a polluting construction site that will transform this scenic vista to an apocalyptic wasteland. The plan also talks about green corridors, a poor substitute for the expanse of green space we have already. Where will people walk their dogs and run then? The A2? The A28? Whilst their children play in a concrete spoil heap of a place that they used to call home. I want to walk in orchards and fields. I want to walk somewhere that there isn't a pavement. I want dark skies where I can see the stars. I want to walk there every day, and I don't want to get in a car to get there. More than anything, I want you to listen to us. To the council officers sitting to my left, I say this. There has been a distinct lack of involvement in the views of the community throughout the process of the local plan. The plan is vague, and all comments we have made in previous consultations have been ignored. What is the point of the consultation process then? Our views haven't been considered, and because of this, the plan has to be deemed unsound. To the councillors sitting in front of me, you are elected representatives. You have the duty to care to the people of Canterbury and the people of
Thank you for your contribution.
duty to protect the wildlife and preserve the heritage.
Thank you for your contribution. I could have Alan Davidson, please.
Good evening. My name is Alan Davidson, 72 Hollow Lane. I'm here to speak as a resident whose street is directly targeted for mitigation in this plan, but more importantly as a citizen warning the council that policy C10, the Merton Park development, is fundamentally unsound. Since your last consultation, the evidence base has changed, and it has changed in a way that makes this allocation legally indefensible. So first, there's the viability trap. The February 2026 IDP now admits that the true cost of Merton Park, to even begin with, the site requires 15.9 million primary school development and the 10 million on-site private wastewater treatment plant to bypass the Stodmarsh nutrient crisis. When you add the required highway works and the new sports hub, the site-specific infrastructure burden exceeds 32 million. Under the National Planning Policy Framework, an allocation must be deliverable. With these soaring costs, plus the Council's mandatory 30% affordable housing and a district-wide community infrastructure levy deficit of 66 million, the January 2026 viability update is built on a house of cards. This site is not financially achievable. It's a strategic risk that will fail the effectiveness test at examination. That's the first point. Second point, the transport admission. The Council's new transport forecast is an admission of failure. It sets an aspirational 20% mode shift target, yet admits that in the first 5 years, we will see a mere 3 to 5% shift. For those of us on Hollow Lane, the solution is making our road one way to Wincheap. This is a sticking plaster on a severed artery. Your own IDP admits that site-specific works are insufficient to mitigate the cumulative growth. You're planning to pour thousands of cars onto the A28 based on theoretical bus schemes that have no guaranteed funding. This is not justified planning, it's a transport fantasy. The third point, it's irredeemable harm. Finally, look at your own sustainable appraisal. Merton Park has received a double negative score, the worst possible rating for impact on biodiversity, priority habitats, and the setting of our World Heritage Site. Policy C10 claims the traditional Wincheap orchard, a protected priority habitat, can be enhanced while being encircled by 4,000 houses. This is ecologically impossible. You cannot embrace an ancient ecosystem by suffocating it with high-density urban sprawl. So, councillors, if you vote for this plan, with Merton Park included, you are voting for a plan that is unsound. You are inviting the planning inspector to tear it apart because the infrastructure is uncosted, the transport is undeliverable, and the environmental damage is admitted in your own documents. So I would urge you to protect the integrity of the plan and the future of South Canterbury. Remove policy C10. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dave Wilson. I'm speaking tonight in a personal capacity, just so we're clear. I'm not here to critique particular details of the plan, but rather the process that's led you to what you have in front of you. The purposes of the Regulation 19 consultation require that you evidence changes and evidence the proposals that are going forward. But you can't do that. And the reason you can't do that is that there is no evidence to justify the changes that have been made since the 2024 plan. Now, I spent most of last weekend, sadly for me, going through the two documents. I made 6 pages of bullet points of changes. Your report suggests there are only 8. That is disingenuous, to say the least. Among the changes made in this new version of the plan, it deletes any references to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It also significantly weakens the requirements for biodiversity net gain, net zero carbon, advanced infrastructure, affordable and social housing provision, and any policy, even if you agree it, where the viability of the development is threatened. Those changes are new, and they haven't been consulted on. Neither the report before you, nor the plan, nor the evidence library provides any justification for them. They are certainly not justified by the public comments that have been made prior to this Regulation 19 draft. Specific site requirements have been changed too. In the one I'm most familiar with, which is RS6, deletions have been made regarding green corridors, views, safety, requirements for coordination with adjacent developments, protection against the merging of Hurston and Westbere, protection of archaeology, minerals assessments, applying SUDs to the site, biodiversity net gain again, landscape buffers, ancient woodlands, and ecological connectivity. There were 28 consultation responses to the previous draft. 27 of those said very clearly the site was not suitable for development. It's still in, and there is no sign that the changes, the things that have been deleted, were commented on at all by anybody. It's a significant watering down, dilution of what's in the plan. So there's no indication at all of an objective methodology for assessing the consultation responses and translating that into the amendments that have been put forward. Of course, the volume of comments and the scope of the plan don't lend themselves to easy summation. But what is presented in the evidence library is incoherent and impossible to assess. There are 76 appendices to the consultation topic paper. It's impossible for anybody, let alone a layperson, to have read it and gathered it, and there is not an adequate précis of any of it, and there is no explanation about how any of the comments have translated into the changes that have been made.
Start to wind up.
Yep. To summarise, because you got there just before me, I've just given you 3 minutes of examples of a failure to link consultation responses to the changes made. Without that, you can't justify the policies being proposed. I haven't even scratched the surface of the changes, but you can see they're substantive to the detriment of our environment and of those people who desperately need homes.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Thanks.
Philip Barefoot, please.
Thank you, Chair. I live adjacent to the proposed W6 and W9 development in Whitstable, and I'm speaking on behalf of the residents in Golden Hill and its surrounds. And we consider this draft plan promotes many negative aspects. For example, loss of green space, wildlife, traffic issues and delays, accidents, visual impacts, sewage and flooding. Residents submitted their obligations in the autumn of 2025, and we feel our objections individually and as a community have not been listened to at all, as the previous speaker made points on. And Whitstable has not been treated the same as Canterbury for certain. Having lived in Golden Hill for 23 years, and over that time have witnessed and experienced court cases and civil cases over access and ownership, and this continues today. And quite easily will continue or could continue for another 20 years. The council may well need a plan B, as approximately 50% of the council's council-wide travellers' pitch needs are allocated to West 6 and West 9. West 9, at the time of the autumn consultation, had a planning application for a bungalow and garage, and now is subject to a planning inspectorate appeal for non-determination, maybe one pitch site down already. The Council's draft housing strategy states, section 4.14, an overall need for 43 additional gypsies and traveller pitches. It goes on to say, the draft local plan is considering meeting this need by regularising sites that are not permanently authorised and additional pitch provision on existing sites. No mention of Golden Hill at all, and that's in the evidence base. There are mixed messages within the evidence base in the draft Reg 19, which lead to a community mistrust. During heavy rain, the Thanet Way floods. My own bungalow suddenly has a river running on either side of it. This will be further exacerbated with developments at West 5 and proposals for West 6 and West 9. The excess water from the Golden Hill site have nowhere to flow other than over the Thanet Way and into the new development, Whitstable Heights, which fortunately is half empty. There are already major capacity issues with sewage and sewage treatment without any further developments in Whitstable. Whitstable also attracts thousands of visitors each year, and the sewage system cannot cope. Just stating if it is a sudden water issue is not acceptable for residents. The road at Golden Hill in many places is extremely narrow, mostly without a pavement and adequate visibility. Walking and cycling along the road is highly dangerous. Leaving Golden Hill by car to join the Thanet Way is dangerous and very time intensive these days. The new developments will only exacerbate this problem. W6, the highest point in Whitstable, has amazing views of the countryside and views of the town and sea. The skyline can be seen from all directions, the harbour, the castle and the Marine Hotel. So development of W6 will impact massively on the appearance of the whole area. A site visit is a must before any final decision is made. To conclude, planning policy and case law requires that permission only be granted if a scheme is deliverable and obligations and conditions can be enforced. Residents of Golden Hill and its surrounds will be reserving their right through the Regulation 19 consultation process to be heard and seen by the Planning Inspectorate in the future.
Thank you very much. Ben Holland is the next speaker. Thanks.
Good evening. I've lived in Canterbury for 15 years and have a child at Wincheap Primary School. I've liaised with teachers, fellow parents and the school council about the local plan, in particular the proposed Merton Park development. Regarding this site, the assistant head of Wincheap School says, on behalf of the senior leadership team, we must advocate for the safety and well-being of our pupils, their families and the wider community. These are our collective concerns regarding the soundness and viability of the proposed Merton Park development. Safety risks. Increased traffic next to the school, as well as along Hollow Lane and Homersham, would significantly heighten the risk of harm to children walking or cycling to school. This is not acceptable. Congestion. The proposed vehicle access points feed into extremely busy areas of Canterbury, single carriageways with stagnant traffic at rush hour. As we have witnessed this very week, roadworks in several places in the Canterbury locality all at once are enough to throw Canterbury into complete gridlock. In Wincheap, it doesn't take much at all to trigger standstill traffic along the A28. Disruption during the construction phases will seriously impact the wider city traffic flow. Air quality. Wincheap has the lowest air quality in the whole of Canterbury and needs its green space so much more. Air quality will deteriorate further if the site is developed due to that loss of green space, population increase and construction traffic. This increases the risk of respiratory conditions and children. Loss of valued green space would significantly impact mental health, including children's. There is no other comparable green space for Wincheap. Play areas are sparse, and in any case, they're not for everyone to use. Survey data from Save Wincheap Orchards campaign, which currently has more than 320 responses, is revealing when asked the question, if the development goes ahead, would you still visit the site? 97% of respondents said no. The green corridors put forward in the plan are a poor substitute for the space that is there and will not meet the needs of the existing community. It will deprive them of fresh air and exercise that this space currently offers on their doorstep. It would be a loss of learning space for Worthgate Scouts and the adjacent schools. This plan recognises the intrinsic value of the countryside within the district and the contribution this makes to its rural character. These are your words, taken from the spatial strategy. Allocating Merton Park undermines that statement. This space has been a treasured landscape for centuries and is used by people daily, and it does the heavy lifting in providing rural character to Canterbury, especially because of the unique panoramic views of the cathedral from multiple vantage points around the site. Developing this site will irrevocably destroy these rural views of the cathedral forever. Undoubtedly, this is not the first time these concerns have been flagged, so I'm asking you, why have these been essentially ignored? Where have you set out the reasoning for keeping C10 in the plan despite objections? And it is disrespectful to the people who have spent so much time researching and feeding back during multiple consultations. The feelings are strong. I hope you can see that here tonight. Residents have spoken and we deserve answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Barney Parsons, please. I don't see Barney. Barney Parsons.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me here this evening. I'm Barney Parsons from the Wincheap Society. In looking at the soundness of the plans for the Merton Park development, C10, and the surroundings of the Merton Park development, I can see a few areas where the plans may not be sound, despite the consultations and all that's been gone before. The major problem, or a major problem, is the vehicle access to the site. There are just two ways in, if you look at the plans, for private motor vehicles and construction traffic. One brown arrow on the plan sends traffic through Homersham, Hollow Lane and Birch Road. Now, you may not know where Birch Road is, but it's just a little cul-de-sac off Homersham. The other brown arrow for ordinary motor vehicles and site traffic will be at Nackington, which will have no connectivity with the A2 whatsoever, although a park and bus site is planned nearby. Is that sound? The map in the plan, and I think you should look at this, council officers, because you haven't looked at it, is several years out of date. It fails to show 40 plus houses already built in Homersham and the road network in Homersham and the roundabout which was so expensively constructed to go with that area. The observatory is not there. It's the most expensive housing development in the city, and you've forgotten it. It's not there. I don't think the planning inspector will give you very high marks for your homework in that respect at all. Now, Homersham and Hollow Lane are residential neighbourhoods and are unsuited, not designed to become throughways to a development of this size. It is unsound to have this route as the main access to the extensive site, and it may even be unsafe as it stands at the moment. A further major problem with accessing Merton Park is the fourth A2 off-slip road. This slip road will be part of the site access from the A2 eastbound to the site. This will add further complications to Wincheap's traffic, especially at the A2-A28 junction. In today's Regulation 19 local plan, the off-slip road is shown as a very, very vague oval, dotted, with no design whatsoever. Council officers can only currently say, and they have said this 2 weeks ago, that they believe the plan has been accepted in principle by National Highways. But no slip road, no Merton Park. Is that going to happen? No slip road, it might lead to it. There is a very plausible solution which I will offer, which could help relieve some of Wincheap's traffic problems and which has been neglected by those drawing up the local plan. It is not another gyratory system, by the way. It's to consider a road junction of the A2 at Nackington. This could encourage any development of Merton Park to be opened up from the Nackington Road end rather than the Wincheap end, with the potential to leave a decent amount of open green space from the site near the city centre accessible to all. Maybe a proper park might be in order there. Leave the green space at this end of the town. You could even put a park and ride at Nackington, and then Wincheap could breathe more easily. I urge the Overview Committee to give this suggestion some consideration, as it could mitigate some future difficulties arising from this development. Thank you very much.
Bethany Cunnington is the next speaker.
Dear councillors, my name is Bethany Cunnington and I'm a first year doing an ecology and conservation degree at the University of Kent. I have grown up in Wincheap and live just next door to the orchards and fields. I am here to give biodiversity a voice. I love wildlife and have spent countless hours in the orchards and fields appreciating and recording the wildlife. It is not just me who reaps the benefits from the wildlife in this rural space. According to a survey done by Wincheap Orchards and Fields Group, 62% of respondents highlighted that they enjoy the wildlife. This landscape, it supports a high level of biodiversity, which is a key part of its landscape value. I have evidence for 52 species of birds, of which 13 are endangered and 15 are threatened on this site. Of these, we have several migratory bird species, such as redwings and fieldfares, which are threatened and endangered. They travel all the way from Russia and Iceland and Scandinavia just to overwinter in these orchards. These birds are orchard specialists and rely on windfall apples. They rely on them to such an extent that the breeding success of these species in their home countries depends on the amount of food they get in their overwintering sites. So, if the orchards were gone, this would not only affect local populations of birds, but international populations already at risk of extinction. Furthermore, since the 1950s in the UK, we have lost 90% of our orchards. This habitat cannot be recreated. Without the orchards, many species would not occur here as they depend on them for their survival. Species have adapted to this ecosystem for hundreds of years. This is now one of the last remaining orchards in Canterbury. Much of the biodiversity of this area relies on the mosaic of habitat this land brings, with ancient hedgerows connecting it all. The fields, perhaps to your surprise, are also included, as leftover grain and corn supports many species. Skylarks, which are on the red list, rely on them for breeding. The roundels also increase biodiversity. I don't only have evidence for birds, but for a wide array of invertebrates, reptiles and mammals, including protected species such as badgers and bats. We have several keystone species here. These species have a disproportionately large impact on their environment and hold the ecosystem together, one of which is field voles. Voles are crucial food for vole specialists such as kestrels, tawny owls and long-eared owls, which are present here. Relative to the area, there is a very large population of birds of prey, which indicates the prey abundance. It is a well-known fact in ecology that biodiversity increases with the size and surface area of a space. Therefore, it is impossible to improve the biodiversity of this area while building a housing development on crucial existing habitat. Additionally, to achieve the 20% biodiversity net gain on site lacks a proportionate evidence base. There are several large developments occurring in and around Canterbury, and the impacts of these developments will accumulate. Thus, for biodiversity net gain to be achieved, the residents of Wincheap think it a better use of this site would be for biodiversity net gain, as it is already rich in biodiversity and valued for this quality. Thank you.
Can I have Councillor Peter Campbell, please?
Hi, my name is Peter Campbell and I'm one of the ward councillors for Wincheap on Canterbury City Council. Thank you for enabling me to speak on this subject tonight. I've read a fair amount of the vast quantity of documentation and supporting evidence on this Regulation 19 local plan, and I've certainly formed views, but I will listen to the views expressed at this overview committee tonight, plus the Cabinet and full Council on the 18th of March before coming to a final conclusion when a vote to publish the plan for consultation will be taken. And I'll also try to read the rest of that documentation, of which, as one of the previous speakers said, is a vast amount. However, on what I've read so far, I'm struggling to conclude that this local plan delivers a plan that meets the soundness criteria and is one that is right for the people of Wincheap or the people of Canterbury. You will shortly hear some of my fellow Green Party councillors talk about how this plan fails to deliver against its own policies and targets, which I won't repeat here, but urge you to consider when the time comes. This Regulation 19 edition is the third iteration of the plan under this council, with previous Regulation 18 versions issued in early 2024 and late 2025. Throughout this process, we've seen strategic sites come and go. The university site, known as the Blean, was included and dropped, and similarly, so most recently the land at Rattington Street in Chartham and the land east of Chesterfield. What this suggests is that there are precious few clearly suitable sites within our district to meet the required housing numbers across the plan years, and the viability of many of those sites is borderline to the extent that upon closer examination they are demonstrably not suitable for incorporation into the plan. One site I've not mentioned so far is the Merton Park development, site C10, which sits within my ward of Wincheap. During my election campaign last November, this was the #1 topic on the doorstep by residents and continues to be the primary focus of community concern. I received many emails and other communications on this topic, and not one of them has been in favour of the proposal. Certainly nobody thinks that Merton Park will provide the necessary housing of the right size and the right value to satisfy local needs. Many of those residents, many of whom are here today, responded to the focus consultation on the Regulation 18 draft local plan, but the Merton Park strategic site remains broadly unchanged, other than the incorporation of a bus and ride facility. While this is welcomed in principle, I'm sure laying more tarmac was not a key request from residents in response to that. It does feel that the people of Wincheap have not been listened to. You will shortly hear or have heard from Wincheap residents about the deep distress that this proposal is causing, their reasons across several areas, many of which have already been mentioned tonight. Access to open spaces, access to the site, environmental concerns, biodiversity and infrastructure. Why this development should not be included in the plan, or at least significantly reconfigured. I won't repeat their concerns here. I think they've been given a good airing, but I do ask you to listen carefully to everything that's been said today and will come following me. They are Canterbury residents as much as people from the Blean, Charlton or Chesfield and deserve to be heard. I mentioned earlier about the soundness of the plan.
Wind up, please.
And I checked how the Merton Park development sits against the strategic objectives of the plan, and against nearly every objective it scores negative. The only objectives where it's positive is to provide homes and achieve a strong economy.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
This does not feel like a proposal that should be included, and I ask officers to reconsider.
Thank you. Time's up. Thank you very much. Peter Slaughter is our next speaker.
Can you hear me? Good. This draft local plan is not ready for Regulation 19 consultation. It does not comply with national planning policy in numerous respects. For example, government policy NPPF 110 states that significant development should be focused on locations that are or can be made sustainable through limiting the need to travel and offering a choice of transport modes. Building almost 2,000 houses around the edge of Whitstable scores badly in this respect. You could build more sustainably at the University of Kent site, for example, but you've removed that from the plan. Their site is right next to the biggest employer in Canterbury District, the university itself, and there's a frequent shuttle bus from the university to the city. What's more, the site is served by a regular cycle route to the city centre, and Canterbury has a much better train service than Whitstable. Faster trains to London, in fact, quicker journeys to almost everywhere. Whitstable is a less well-connected place. Chesfield, in particular, is mostly car dependent. Many people drive to Canterbury, including to the universities. NPPF 109 states councils, when making their plans, should assess the impacts of traffic, but the council appears to have overlooked the very significant matter of pedestrians. For example, the 1,000 pupils at the planned Bodkin School. Pedestrian safety is one problem, especially on the narrow pavements by Chesfield Station. Another problem is that huge numbers of pupils using signalised crossings near roundabouts will exacerbate existing traffic queues that block the roundabouts. This would seriously impact road capacity. But you can be sure that none of this has yet been modelled or evaluated. At present, you have no idea what problems would arise at the Chesfield roundabouts if you were to implement your plan. NPPF 96 says that planning policies and decisions should aim to achieve healthy places, which enable healthy lives through prevention of ill health. But your almost 2,000 new homes in Whitstable would significantly increase sewage effluent problems on our beaches and our sea. Not good for a tourist town with a fishing fleet and shellfish businesses. It will exacerbate existing health hazards where people already get ill. Your plans for Broad Oak Reservoir are based on using water from the Great Stour, already known to be polluted by sewage effluent and damaging Stodmarsh Nature Reserve. South East Water won't explain how they intend to remove chemical pollutants. They don't appear to have a plan. There's a lot more, but we're out of time. I should add that there's a widespread feeling in Whitstable, like other places apparently, that the council ignore our views, and you don't understand the problems your plans would create. More people objected to Brooklands than any other site in a local plan. Please do the right thing and take it out of the plan. Thank you.
Councillor Claire Turnbull, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. There are some great aspirations in this draft local plan. Strategic objectives for the district, economy, education, environment and travel are aimed at making this district a thriving and pleasant place to live. It's good to see environmental strategy and sustainable design strategy up front, policies 1, SS1 and 2. There are a lot of laudable aims. Where the plan falls down is in setting out actual solutions to the problems we face. On a local level, I'm struggling to see how this plan is good for Whitstable. We have a small town centre which is being increasingly submerged in urban sprawl. There is little alternative but to visit the town centre by car. I see no mention of provision of buses to facilitate movement around the town and relieve the pressure on the narrow streets in the centre. There is no aspiration, let alone commitment to, say, a local hopper service, which could link up the outer limits of the town with the station in the centre. The 200 to 300 car and bus park is still a white elephant in the wrong place with no committed bus service. It's hard to see how it will be an attractive option for visitors. The huge development of Brooklands is still in there, as we've just been hearing, despite very strong objections from local residents. The impact of development here will fundamentally change the landscape and character of Chesfield. No attempt has been made even to scale back these proposals to protect farmland and reduce the impact on the local area. But I've also got a more fundamental problem with the plan. The glaring oversight in the plan, and indeed in the government's determination to build, is the fact that this region's infrastructure is already overwhelmed by the level of development we currently have. Anyone attending last night's scrutiny meeting will have heard South East Water state quite clearly that they are already struggling to keep up with fresh water demand. We have a planning system which does not allow either the water suppliers nor the waste treatment suppliers to state that the system simply cannot cope with proposed levels of development. This government is willfully ignoring the fact that this is a resource issue. I'm all for holding water companies to account for their shocking dereliction of duty in developing infrastructure and creaming off profits for greedy shareholders, but there won't magically be sufficient water in our area for the numbers of residents projected in this plan just because we have a reservoir at Broadoak. This level of development is storing up serious problems for the future. This is not scaremongering. This is obviously quite clear. We're already seeing the beginnings of it. We live in an area of low rainfall and high demand. Climate change is exacerbating these problems, resulting in unpredictable weather patterns. And of course, our foul water treatment facilities are over capacity and failing. We should be pushing back on the housing targets given for this district. The level of development in this plan is neither desirable nor sustainable. Thank you.
That's Keith Bothwell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I have very serious misgivings about this local plan presented by the ruling coalition. There may be a few aspects in this plan, the 20% biodiversity net gain. Sorry, there may be a few welcome aspects in this plan, the 20% biodiversity net gain, which is above national requirements, and a tilted emphasis on using brownfield sites, although unfortunately that will have minimal impact. But one cannot get over the fact that the whole ethos of the local plan is not driven by what local people need and how we want our local communities to develop over the next 15 to 20 years. No, the local plan is geared directly towards satisfying the greed of landowners and developers at the expense of local people. The large number of houses included in the plan is simply not required. It is therefore very hard to see how one can support such a plan when we as councillors are elected by local people to represent their interests. Even if one were to accept the housing numbers at face value, the plan does not stand scrutiny. The infrastructure, sewage, water supply, roads and public transport links, etc., are not only inadequate to cope with any additional housing numbers, but they are failing us already, as we can all see. Closely linked to that, housing is not located rationally on the basis of logical planning criteria. Sites are selected on the basis of what landowners want, not on what we want as a community. As a council, we should be choosing to locate housing close to local facilities such as schools, major roads and transport hubs with easy access to the countryside and other amenities. But no, site selection, which changes with each draft of the local plan, is a bit like doing the hokey cokey. You got this site in, that site out, in, out, shake it all about. You know how it goes. Cooting Farm in, Cooting Farm out, in, out, in. University of Kent out, University of Kent in, then out again. Only recently, the Thannington Rec Park and Ride was suddenly put in, only for it to be removed again just a few weeks later. Charlton was ruled out because of the flood risk. Then it was in, now it's out again. How can I, as a councillor, have any confidence that the current version in front of us is the best we could get, let alone acceptable? All these in-out movements were generated not by rational and rigorous planning considerations. No, it was all led by landowner pressure to put sites in, public pressure to take sites out, political pressure to take out other sites. My present view is that we should throw the whole lot out, turn around, and begin again from first principles, starting with a realistic assessment of what local people actually need and what the local infrastructure has the capacity to provide to create thriving and healthy communities for the future. Thank you.
I've got a few speakers on the list. I'm not quite sure if they're here, but I am going to call them. Darryl Back is the next on the list. Darryl, are you here? No. No. There's no Darryl. I've got Trevor Huffy. Yep, Trevor.
Good evening. My name is Trevor Huffy. I'm a member of the Save Beacon Road Community Land Committee on the Council's proposal to allocate the old hockey club ground in Beacon Road for residential development, HB4, in its draft local plan 2040. We believe the following points should be taken into account. The land is part of an existing conservation area, and any new build would not be in keeping with the Victorian properties which currently surround the land. The council themselves have stated that there is a lack of green infrastructure and open space in Herne Bay, and in particular in Heron Ward. The council's policy HB3 states that the council will seek to protect and enhance open spaces, and the council's policy DS21 states that the council is committed to biodiversity gain and enhancement in the area. The land is currently designated as protected open space under the existing local plan. Why then is it suggested that the land is redesignated as residential development? Surely this makes a mockery of the reasoning for making it a protected open space in the first place. The land has been accepted and registered by the council as an asset of community value. The council considers the land to be a brownfield site. However, when assessing this definition for land, it is important to note that brownfield status has not been deliberately created by neglect or lack of management. In this respect, following the erection of a high spike fence 6 years ago sealing off the land, the council have completely neglected or failed to maintain the land. In addition, the council will need to show that the continuation of the existing use of open space or an alternative policy compliant use cannot be found. Taking into account these points, we believe the land should be used, for example, as allotments, community gardens and orchard, a play area for children and for wildlife and biodiversity enhancement. In this respect, a local charity, Herne Bay in Bloom, together with Beach Creative, have indicated a positive interest in getting involved. They already have concept plans and proposals, which have today been emailed to all local councillors by their chair, Lucy Platel. In putting forward these proposals, we've taken into account the provisions and requirements of the Council's draft Local Plan 2040, Green Infrastructure Strategy, Urban Greening, Biodiversity Strategy, Open Space Strategy, and also the Corporate Plan, which includes the UN SDG requirements. The Council has stated that it is fully committed to all of these strategies. Whilst we appreciate the Council has a housing target to meet, it is felt that 20 houses could be spread across other larger and more appropriate sites. In 2002, an application was submitted for residential development on this land and was rejected on the basis of lack of sewage disposal, water pressure and parking, amongst other matters. No improvements have been made since that time, and therefore the problems remain. In conclusion, we as a committee believe that these proposals being put forward articulate a clear policy-aligned alternative use to residential development, which will both secure the local community and will provide the council with the benefit of a development project which will have a positive, social, healthy, environmentally friendly and successful outcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Got Chris Halls. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and Councillors. I'm a resident of Orham Close, directly affected by W6, Golden Hill and West 9, west of Golden Hill. While I focus on these allocations, the same concerns apply across the entire plan. First point is soundness and deliverability, NPPF tests. W6 depends entirely on W5 for vehicular access. W5 must deliver that access before 25% occupation. W6's gypsy traveller pitches must be delivered before any market dwellings. If W5 slips, W6 stalls. This interdependency risks the allocation being ineffective. Similar deliverability risks are evident plan-wide. Second point is transport and highway safety. Golden Hill is narrow, it lacks continuous footways, has poor visibility, and is already used as a very dangerous cut-through. Cumulative traffic from W5, W6, W9 worsens risk at A299 corridor and for pedestrians as well. Existing infrastructure is not demonstrably safe for additional growth. Next point is water, foul drainage and flooding. Residents already experience surface water runoff around Thanet Way and sewer capacity problems. The plan recognises the need for new improved wastewater treatment, yet there is no firm funded time-bound solution tied to W6, W9. Proceeding regardless is not effective plan making. Failures in water provision are town-wide. Next point is landscape and visual impact. W6 is prominent and elevated. Even with the required northern buffer and southern open space, harm to long views and the settlement edge remains. Contrary to the plan's landscape objectives, loss of green space further erodes habitat and amenity. Next point is evidence consistency and concentration of pitches. The evidence shows 43 pitches district-wide and indicates meeting need by regularising expanding existing sites, yet Reg 19 concentrates 21 pitches in South Whitstable, 20 at W6 and 1 at W9, all off Golden Hill. This ties to W5 and again undermines the justified and effective tests. Next point is availability and planning history. W9 is entangled with a bungalow application and a planning inspectorate appeal, placing availability in doubt. From a decision perspective, considering deliverability risk, unresolved water, wastewater capacity, known runoff and foul incidents, highway safety concerns, landscape and visual harm, and additional air, light pollution, the policies cannot go ahead. If the local plan must be decided as one package, I object in full on these grounds. The plan acknowledges that major infrastructure upgrades are needed, yet none are committed with time-bound funding for these allocations. Proceeding regardless is not effective plan making and will erase finite green space and habitats we cannot replace. On gypsy and traveller provision, the need is allegedly established. However, placing them on Golden Hill and tying delivery to W5 is over-concentrated and unsound for this site. On transport, drainage and landscape evidence at least. These are all valid planning considerations. Our community feels utterly unheard. I pleaded to stand up for Whitstable voters and their habitat as opposed to London exodus.
Thank you. Your time's up.
The town is exhausted and at full capacity. Thank you.
Our final public speaker is Alan Atkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Chairman of Bridge Parish Council. Bridge Parish has developed its own neighbourhood plan, which has been examined and was adopted by this council in April 24. I remain eternally grateful to Andrew Thompson and his team for their assistance. and I wish him well with steering his own plan here. Our plan contains development which will obtain land for recreational use, and we'll see a village hall built, a much needed village hall built. These facilities will serve our village and a large area roundabout, including large areas of South Canterbury. It's extensive recreational facilities, football grounds, tennis courts, walking spaces, as well as a modern village hall, something we've lacked for some considerable time. But the scheme depends on receiving assistance via the Infrastructure Development Plan, which is one of the documents, I think it's an appendix, one of the documents which is put up for recommendation or otherwise this evening. However, our neighbourhood plan will proceed. It has been adopted, has been approved. We are moving that forward. However, things work out this evening. So it is a very important scheme for not just us, but for the entire part of South Canterbury. And therefore, I would be very grateful if, whatever the outcome from this evening, that you, in respect of this huge recreational resource, we will obtain land, we will obtain these facilities, and obviously make them available to yourselves, as we have done for many decades, for the rest of Canterbury. That you will continue to recommend that we receive the assistance that is going to be needed to deliver on this project. We may need as much as £3 million. We have earmarked, we have identified £1 million of our own. We are working very hard. It would be very much appreciated if, however tonight turns out, the assistance that we look to from the district is still being offered. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of our public speakers. I know many of you might not have spoken at a meeting like this before, so I think everyone's very grateful to hear from you, and I've heard everything that you've had to say tonight. So thank you very much. I'm going to take a 5-minute break here because I think we just need a break to move into the next part of the meeting. So for those of you who've come along to hear public speakers, it's a good opportunity. If you want to leave now, you can, and you're very, very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting as well. But we're going to take a pause for people to stretch their legs, get a glass of water, whatever it happens to be, and then we'll resume in at 12 minutes past 8. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. So item number 5 on the agenda, Canterbury District Local Plan, publication Regulation 19 and submission Regulation 22, and associated matters. And for councillors, that's on pages 6 to 487 of your packs. It's a long one. We're here to consider the report of Peter Davis, Joint Chief Executive, Susie Wakeman, Joint Chief Executive, and Leah Whitlock, Head of Policy and Communications. We've heard from our public speakers, and now we'll hand over to Leo, who's going to do a few slides of a presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I won't keep the meeting very long because I think the debate is the main point of the evening. Just to remind everybody that this Regulation 19, Draft 19 plan is part of a long series of consultations, and the process started in 2020. And as you can see from that, there's been a lot of consultation exercises, and people have really engaged with the process, for which we thank them, and including the public speakers tonight. Again, the public speakers tonight have shown a really good knowledge of Regulation 19, but just to remind you, Regulation 19 consultation is different to the consultations we've carried out before. It's a very peculiar, particular type of consultation that looks at the legal and procedural compliance of the plan, using lots of evidence bases like the sustainability appraisal. Soundness, as some of the public speakers have tried to address tonight, means it should be positively prepared, it needs to be justified, it needs to be effective, and it needs to be consistent with national policy. And these are the tests that the inspector will apply at subsequent public examination. What does that mean for people taking part in the, if you, Cabinet and full council agree to the Regulation 19 consultation? What does that mean for respondents taking part? All of the responses will be passed to the inspector to assess. General objections can be submitted, but the inspector will focus on representations that focus on soundness and legal compliance, as many of the speakers tonight have tried to address it in that way. We plan to produce guidance to help people prepare effective comments as part of that Regulation 19 consultation. And the inspector can only recommend changes later where these are necessary to make the plan sound or legally compliant. What about the examination in public? After the Regulation 19, if it's passed, finishes, the inspector may invite it's held by the inspector, controlled by the planning inspector, and that inspector may invite anyone who's responded at Regulation 19 to provide written or verbal evidence at the examination, effectively a public inquiry. The inspector will decide who he or she wants to invite to take part in that process. Only people that have submitted representations at Regulation 19 will be eligible to appear at the examination, and we'll be making that very clear should the consultation go ahead. What does this mean for overview, Cabinet and full council? The Regulation 19 local plan has to be taken as a whole. It can either be agreed or rejected, but it cannot be amended at this stage. An amendment passed would require the local plan to be rejected, and any amendment would need to be considered as part of a further review, so we can assess the evidence, the legal compliance and the soundness. Officers cannot recommend an unsound plan to Cabinet and full council, and it cannot be submitted for publication, examination in public. Overview committees tonight, and then the Cabinet, some of the members of the Cabinet here to listen to the views tonight, and obviously the recording will be available for full council to listen to. Cabinet and full council meet on the 18th of March to consider the Regulation 19 plan. If agreed, the consultation will last for 8 weeks from March to May. Once all the views are gathered in, we will pass those to the Secretary of State in September for them to appoint a planning inspector. We hope an examination in public will take place in around November, but again within the hands of the planning inspectorate, with an aim for adoption in the winter of 2027. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so, Councillor Auld.
Could I just clarify with Leo the issue about the local plan? We cannot have amendments at this stage. This is before Reg 19. Has he checked that point with the legal officer? Because I sent a message to the legal officer and it's at odds with what you've just said.
Do you want to respond to that? One of you? Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the point of the monitoring officer's email was to try and set out how you could approach stuff. So the point was you can't make an amendment that would make a material change to the local plan where there isn't an evidence base within the local plan to back it up. In particular, based on what Leo shared, the sustainability assessment, if something is changed, taken out, added, that would have a potential impact on the sustainability assessment, and therefore it wouldn't meet the legal or soundness tests. Non-material changes, typos, small changes to how it's worded or interpreted could be allowed. But ultimately, if councillors were looking to make an amendment which changed the fabric, the allocations within the plan, ultimately what they're saying is that they do not believe that the plan is ready, and therefore are saying that it should be not passed for Regulation 19 when it goes to full council.
If I could just come back, can I quote the legal officer? I can confirm that this is not a constitutional ban on submitting and voting on amendments. I repeat that. I can confirm that that there is not a constitutional ban on submitting and voting on amendments. She then goes on to give practical examples of amendments that are possible. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. I believe that's pretty much what I just said as well. It's pretty much that you can make amendments, but ultimately, if it changes how the local plan is set out and therefore changes the evidence base of the local plan, you can make an amendment, but ultimately council would have to withdraw the Regulation 19. The amendments would then go back for council officers to consider and a new regulation come forward. There is no guarantee that those amendments could be taken forward in a new Regulation 19. It would have to pass all the sustainability and the evidence bases it required. So even if an amendment is made, it would be for to go through the new process, and a new Regulation 19 would have to be created and considered by councillors at that point.
Councillor Flanagan.
No, my point still stands.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. So I'm James Flanagan, one of the two councillors for Chesfield Ward, near to Whitstable, with my colleague, Councillor Old, here tonight, who has just spoken. You're probably going to hear a lot from me tonight, because what I want to do is convey the concerns of residents who I represent and Peter represents in Chesfield, particularly given that a ward of 3,200 houses under this plan would see an increase in housing numbers of around about 60% if this plan is passed. Now, I have to add, because we all want to avoid predetermination, want to vote on March the 18th to represent our wards, I remain open-minded, but I will be conveying the thoughts of residents tonight, for which I do have sympathy, but I will remain open-minded until the night that we vote on this plan. Before I come to that, I have a question for our officers. Our public speakers tonight, we're very grateful for them coming along, have all referred to the points mostly about housing numbers. Am I right in thinking that the way the housing numbers are calculated as part of this plan, and this isn't getting political, this is about the methodology. It's about the methodology. The way they're calculated comes from central government, and that it's based on the size of the district, and then the number of houses that were allocated is based as a ratio on the size of the existing housing stock or dwellings in the district. I think I have that generally right. Is that? Thank you, Andrew. So my second question, they give us that number, presumably without any consideration for infrastructure, roads, environment, types of land. That's down to us as a local council to work out. But that number, when it is set, doesn't consider any of that on a district basis. I think I have that right as well. Thank you. On commenting on the methodology, I don't predetermine myself, so I'm very happy to say I think that methodology is ridiculous. Because we're here with a set number of houses that we have to, and I will go on over 3 minutes, but not too much longer. With a set number of houses that we're having to find in the local plan, where that number has come down and has been given to us from central government without any consideration for infrastructure or many of the issues our residents have raised tonight. And that links very, very closely to all of the concerns I want to raise tonight on behalf of the people of Chesfield, and I know my colleague will as well a little bit later too. So as I say, we're looking at over 3,000 houses existing today in Chesfield Ward. By the time, if Brooklands goes ahead and Bodkin Farm and Golden Hill, you're adding on about 60%. And the infrastructure issue is absolutely key at the forefront of all the residents' minds who we've heard. Just this week, Peter and I have heard from 60 to 70 residents just in the course of the last week. We've spent a lot of time knocking on doors over the last couple of years talking to residents. And it's not about NIMBYism or not in my backyard. It's about the size of these developments and the infrastructure or lack of it that causes concern. Take, for example, Brooklands is a good point in itself, in that here it is in the local plan, 1,400 houses, all the transport references in this plan as well. For those who don't know, there's already an outline planning application in for Brooklands Farm, to which KCC Highways towards the end of last year responded with a holding objection with, I think it was over 20 individual points that brought up concerns about the traffic connection and impact on that particular site. I think Mr. Slaughter spoke earlier and referenced some of that in his speech. So the concerns of residents is that if that's a planning application where that's all being borne out, what on earth is Brooklands doing in this plan if already the planning application is throwing up those concerns? I know I'm going to be told, well, the planning application process is separate to the local plan, but we have to bear in mind that these issues are already being borne out. And you can see that in residents who have conveyed their thoughts to us, and I do remain open-minded, but residents have conveyed those thoughts to us in terms of the concerns they have for that particular site. In addition to that, the concerns we've had for Brooklands, it's in a flood zone, the loss of agricultural land, the impact on wildlife, 2 new slip roads being built on the A299 and the impact that's going to have on a village founded and can be found in the Doomsday Book. This is serious concern on the parts of residents. I'm going to pause now because I'm beginning to convey these thoughts and concerns. I would ask my fellow councillors here tonight and on the council and cabinet members as well to really carefully consider all these points I'm going to be making tonight in light of the fact that we're given what is quite frankly an arbitrary target number that is causing so much concern and creates nothing more than a development whack-a-mole right across our district. I will pause there.
Thank you. Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. And I thank all the speakers who've come today as well. There's some very good points, but I am disappointed in the suggestion that we rip up the local plan and start again, because that's cruel. That will leave us wide open to be taken over by developers and with less say on it, because if we don't have a local plan, they will come in, they will do what they want under presumption rules, and we've already had sites go through under presumption. So I just want to be clear about that it isn't, you can't have no local plan. Without it, you get literally highway robbery. So, you know, that, but coming in on Councillor Flanagan's point, I do worry particularly about the road infrastructure. I have already spoken and I've said before that I think we need more. I actually think we need an off and an on slip that goes east and west if we're going to develop the Brooklands, because otherwise it just pushes all the traffic back to Clapham Hill to Longreach Roundabout, which is already difficult. And I'd really want KCC to look at it properly.
Thank you. Councillor Heber.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to follow on from what's been said already by my fellow councillors. 2 points. One's a kind of macro point picked up from this evening and all the very competent speakers we've had coming out from the community to give their views. And I just took some notes while they were talking, and I'll start off with Dave Wilson talking about the consultation. How does that inform the evidence-based changes from 18 to 19? Philip Barefoot, he felt he was not being listened to, him and his neighbours were not being listened to. He referred to community mistrust. Bethany Cunnington said she wanted to give a biodiversity a voice. Peter Slaughter said the council ignores our views. Chris Hodes said he felt completely and utterly unheard. And that sentiment I get a lot from residents, that these aren't emotive, ill-thought-through moans and groans. These are people in their own time, and I particularly pay tribute to the people I'm most aware of, the Save Brooklands Farm campaign. People give up their own time to print leaflets, to inform people, to look through every line after line after line of the MPPF. They submit considered documents to councillors and to officers as part of the consultation process. And the consensus out there is they get filed in a little book and ignored. And I think Brooklands is a brilliant example of this. I think they have more objections both to planning applications and more comments in the consultation. It's exactly the same. So what is the evidence for things being in and things being out? I mean, we'll have our theories and none of them are very complementary. So I just wanted to pick up on that. I wanted to thank the people for coming here tonight to remind us that the perception is that people are not being heard. This is a top-down from central government to Canterbury City Council and shoved down the throat of the residents of Canterbury District, and that's how most people feel.
Let's stop, please.
The second specific point I wanted to come on to is the point that...
Sorry.
Can I not have a second specific point, or do you want me to shut up and come back later?
You're okay. I will bring Councillor Stockley after. I didn't realise you hadn't finished, so carry on.
I was just pausing for the applause. I wasn't expecting it, but I get it so rarely. I wanted to sort of slightly absorb it. My apologies, my ego taking over there. The second very serious point, and I am running out of time, and it goes into great detail, and it goes back to Councillor Flanagan's point and lots of residents' points that even if you do believe these housing figures, I don't, even if you do think we need 23,800, whatever it is, houses, I don't. But let's take that aside for the moment. Let's look at the infrastructure. Everybody tells about loss of biodiversity, loss of green space, inadequate infrastructure, road congestion, air pollution, but water. And last night's scrutiny committee, the people in the public galleries won't have heard this, there was a clear admission, an absolutely clear admission from senior management at South East Water, who supply water to this district, and councillors in this room know how serious this is because they dealt personally with water outages last summer and this January, that there is inadequate water supply. I've still got my notes from last night. It's a very challenging situation. It's a very tight area. There's little headroom. We're struggling to supply. And when I specifically asked the director during the course of scrutiny meeting what the difference was between their population growth projections and those that we're considering tonight in the local plan, I chose a random year, 2034, there is a 1,600 dwelling discrepancy, around about 4,000 people. So if you believe South East Water, and I'm rather sceptical given their track record, and you believe the housing projection numbers, and I'm very sceptical, then there will still be 4,000 people in 2034 in this district who turn the taps on and nothing comes out. So when we approve this local plan, that's what we're voting for. 4,000 people with no water.
Councillor Stockley, thank you.
Thank you very much. I just have a question, please. Going on from Councillor Flanagan's point about the government dictating how many housing bills we need, does it take into account the houses that have already been passed through planning with developers that have yet to be built out? Please.
Do you want to come back on that point and any of the other points so far? Because we've had 5 speakers, and I thought there's probably a good opportunity to respond on all of those points. Or those that
just specifically on that as a clarification, as Councillor Flanagan mentioned earlier, the methodology was updated fairly recently, and it's flipped away from being based on household projections towards the actual number of dwellings, the dwelling stock of the district at any given point. So the government regards that to be a more reliable figure. That doesn't include permissions that have been granted but not yet constructed. specifically to answer your question. That's in terms of setting that target. Obviously, in terms of supply, permissions that have been granted could be counted towards that overall supply.
Councillor Old.
Thank you, Chair. I must start off by saying that I'm going to fail in my duty as local councillor because I'm unable to provide an adequate critique and explore and assess a 389-page document in just 3 minutes. But I'm not disappointed, and I would urge members of the public not to be disappointed either. The reason not to be disappointed is that expectations are so low. Expectations are so low because, as Councillor Heaver has said, I think that despite the powerful presentations we've had from members of the public, despite the forceful speakers that we've had, I don't see any indication that we can bring about any changes to what's before us. And I now turn to my colleague councillors and say to them that despite their individual reservations, I don't believe that they're approaching this necessarily in an open-minded way. And I suspect that when it comes to the vote at council, they will vote en bloc, which is prima facie evidence of the fact that they are not open-minded but predisposed and predetermined. However, leaving that aside, I have 2 questions. The first question is this issue of presumption, which seems to me to be quite key. I understand there are 2 aspects to presumption. One is about showing an adequate housing supply. The other one is about the number of completions. So if we adopt the local plan, we'll be able to demonstrate future supply, but will we be able to demonstrate an adequate number of completions? And if so, could the officer please tell us, first question, when we will come out of presumption if the local plan is adopted? The second question, building on Councillor Stockley's point, is could you please tell us the number of houses that have been approved but not built out? Thank you.
Andrew?
Certainly answered the first part of your question. I might just need to look up that second number. Didn't have that off the top of my head. You're quite right. Obviously, one of the key tests for the local plan at the inquiry would be about delivering a 5-year supply on the adoption of the local plan. So that's that supply looking forward for the following 5 years, and we'd need to be able to demonstrate that to get out of presumption looking forward. You're also quite right that there is that sort of retrospective test that looks over the previous 3 years, and we have failed that recently, not having a local plan in place. And obviously that's in large part because of the change to the housing formula we've been already discussing tonight, which has seen that significant increase in the target for our area, without us having a plan in place to try and address that target. So for the moment and until the new local plan is adopted, obviously we've got a target that our current plan isn't designed to deliver, so we're likely to stay in presumption by reason of the delivery test. One of the main changes to the plan since last year is around what's called a stepped housing trajectory, which looks to acknowledge the fact that in the early years of the plan, delivery would be expected to be a bit slower than the later years, given the nature of the sites and some of the constraints in the district. So I think without having a crystal ball, obviously, to say exactly what date we might be able to come out of presumption, having that steps approach would make that sooner rather than later.
I'd be very, very grateful if you would come back to me with the number on that, if you could email me with that. I'd also just like to point out that what Councillor Naomi Smith was saying about the local plan protecting us from presumption turns out not to be true, because we've just heard that we will still be in presumption even after the local plan's adopted. Thank you.
Oh, do you want a few minutes? You need to look up something anyway. Councillor Mellish, I think, was next, and then I'll see the other hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take a completely different angle and a different approach to this plan, and moving slightly away from housing, because as a As a councillor for the centre of Herne Bay, Heron Ward, I welcome the vision that the draft plan sets out for Herne Bay, a thriving town with a diverse economy that attracts investment and employment and delivers new opportunities for shopping, community and leisure events, boosting tourism and the local economy. I believe that Herne Bay has much of that already. It's the drive and energy of its residents that keep the town going, that makes this drive, and not just in business and economic way, but in a more community, more direction. Much was promised for Herne Bay under the 2010 and 2017 local area action plans, but little was delivered, except businesses on the outskirts of town and more housing on the outskirts of the town. This draft local plan is, if implemented and properly financed, could make a significant change for the centre of Herne Bay. I think that one of the strengths of the draft plan, it does not look at Herne Bay as just a nice little seaside town with a great beach, but recognises that much needs to be done to improve the town beyond the seafront. The focus on the High Street is interesting, as many see Mortimer Street and William Street as a shopping focus, and the High Street has become neglected. I welcome the commitment in HB2 to work with stakeholders and local communities. Without that sign-off, much of the plans for Central Herne Bay will not happen. Some of that connection is already happening in Herne Bay, and Councillor Chris Cornell, with cabinet responsibility for the coastal towns, is making those connections with local businesses and stakeholder groups, like the Herne Bay Coastal Community Team, the Herne Bay Retail Network, and the Coastal Connect Network. Work has already begun to identify long-term empty shops and to contact the absent landlords, and there are all probably in our town, absent landlords, to find ways to bring these properties back into use. Councillor Carnack and I went down the High Street a few weeks ago with the No Use Empty team on the first foray into this area, trying to get absent landlords to actually reopen those shops, or to get, if they won't do that, then to actually get in there and put new things into there, invest in those areas. I'd like, though, for the Cabinet to pay attention to the element of the draft plan that promises to protect and enhance existing open space and deliver environmental, social and health benefits to communities. This will seem contrary to the proposal in HB4 to turn an open space into a housing development. I recognise that the number of dwellings has been reduced from 32 to 20, but this was never a brownfield site, at least not until the council put a stall gate across the entrance a year or so ago. This has been an open space for since at least the 1920s, and also as a former hockey ground. The reduction in the number of houses is to be welcomed, and has been welcomed by local residents. We now need to ensure that this proposal meets the sustainable development aims of this council, particularly DS24. There's only one green accessible area in Herne Bay which can be turned to several uses, and that's Memorial Park. The Lees down to the King's Hall are not such an area. Nice and green, and very pleasant to walk through, but you can't do much else with it. The space at Beacon Road gives the opportunity to provide community-focused, environment-friendly projects led by community groups and residents, and you heard that from this evening from one of the speakers. There are several local groups already willing to put their ideas into action. There's little merit in building 20 houses on this site. Additional traffic, light pollution, environmental pollution with additional access required to the site, as well as traffic controls at the junction of Beacon Road and Mickleborough Hill or Canterbury Road, and a tiny part of what is needed to meet our housing needs. And it is questionable if this site would meet NPPF standards on being justified when it comes to reviewing this draft plan. If this is not acceptable, then the residents and the community groups need to be actively involved in the development of the area that is not built upon, ensuring that the DS policies, as the DS policies say, provide development which relates to the existing pattern, character and scale of development in the area, and protects the amenity and privacy of adjacent residents, and provide a substantial area of open space for use by new and existing residents. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Buttman next.
Thank you, Chair. So most of my conversations over the last few months has been with the Save the Orchards campaign, and that's the C10 site, but I've always referred to it as the Orchards. You know, I've been on the walks with them. I've been up there myself and seen all the open space and the nature. But I guess the main drawing point on this is that the landowner, I've been told, wants to sell. Whether that be as part to be part of the local plan or to another developer elsewhere. to develop the orchard. And this is where it's really, really tough, because if we didn't accept it, or if it wasn't accepted, what could happen to this land? I mean, I would be concerned that it would still be put into housing. There'd be even less protections that the local plan could give it. It could even become like a data centre or a solar park, which is critical infrastructure that we might not even be able to reject anyway. So it does, but the flip side of that is the mapping, I think, hasn't helped. I know they're indicative maps, but the mapping, how the traffic flows, whether it be down Hollow Lane or Homersham, or there is actually, I think Barney Parsons mentioned Birch Road, the arrow there that goes actually where the playground is at the moment. So I think sometimes the mapping, it could have been clearer that they are rough maps, because I know in the Windsheep Industrial Estate it does miss units in there as well. It has the gyratory going straight at the back of someone's back garden, and it misses like industrial units like Cran and places like that or off it. So I don't think the mapping has helped build much confidence with how the transport modelling would work. And I would like to see, or I would have liked to have seen, a better detail to get on these transport plans. I just want to say I will just say quickly that I was looking at some data on households actually within the Canterbury district, and 35% of households have dependent or non-dependent children living with them. So going forward, these children will need somewhere to live, and as I said, the dependent children would be actively looking probably now for somewhere affordable to live. So we do need housing. We need affordable housing, and we need social housing, and we don't need people rejecting social housing because of the size. Wait a sec. I'll listen to you. That's okay,
Thank
Tom.
you.
It's fine. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Thank
It's
you.
okay.
Thank you.
As I said, so there are children, and I'll agree. Yes, children do need space to run about with as well. But when they're older and want families and themselves, they need somewhere to live. You know, we have Kent Home Choice I think it was a couple of years ago, had over 20,000 people waiting to be housed through Kent and Medway. And there was about just under 3,000 people on that list in Canterbury. So where will these children and adults go who are already living locally or who are already using the services and not having to queue? So they will have their own house using the same water and the same toilets. They won't have to fight to get in the bathroom. But it is, and I will go one final, sorry, Chair, if that's okay. One final point is obviously, yes, I think everyone said we are in presumption, so it does make it really difficult when we're in the planning to reject any sort of development. But I do believe I think it was Andrew was speaking, was it last week, a meeting about the local plan, that in the future, as the local plan progresses or goes through Reg 19, it could have further weight added to it during the planning process. So we do have more of a chance to reject things and ask for more from developers to help. So that's my point at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Got Councillor Dan Smith, I think, next.
Thank you very much, Chair. A couple of points on documentation to begin with. On agenda, the first page of the agenda actually, which was page 6 in the printout, it says further evidence documents are still under preparation and will be available for Cabinet and full Council. Other evidence. We haven't actually got those, have we? So they're not in the pack. We don't have sight of them. It would be quite helpful to know the missing documents, is my point on that one, really. And as an example of that, I think I think it's page 318 on the agenda, where it goes about the Blean Woodland Complex. The Blean Woodland Complex, as defined on the policies map, couldn't find a policies map. It's referred to on several other places as well with different documentation. It would be really helpful to have the policies map, or at least the section of it that relates to each issue in the documentation when it's being discussed, so you can actually see the area that's covered. And then if there's any discrepancy on that, that would be helpful to be picked up at that point and commented on. Also, I think the comments that have been made about the development that has already happened over our district over time, it's actually quite interesting. I think if you're going to increase the amount of housing, as the government has done over time, how much of our land space has already been used, either built on or allocated over, say, a period of time, say for the last 10 years. So the rate of development and the rate of available land become important, because if you're increasing the number of houses, that is going to speed up over time. Well, there is less and less land available. And in terms of pricing, we've talked about affordable housing here and there. Social housing hasn't been mentioned, but I would certainly mention that. It's going to get harder and harder and harder to do anything like that. And I believe we're already at the point where 90% of the housing in the district is unaffordable to the local residents. Councillor Buckman referring to the children, those children who grow up will be not able to live here is essentially the point. So I think comments on all of those would be helpful. Thank you.
Did you want to come in on any of those points already raised? And I'll bring in Councillor Flanagan, I think. Yep.
Yeah, just pick up on a few of those points. I suppose the main point is that the policies map is a crucial tool to sort of interpret, as you say, and many of the policies refer to the policies map in terms of the boundaries that are referred to. That is part of the agenda pack for Cabinet, so it's one of the appendices there, so you can link to it. It's a GIS system that you can access probably best on a computer at the moment. We will have it printed as well, and that will be available. It'll be quite a sizable document, but that is available now.
If I could come back on that quickly, I checked earlier on and I couldn't find it, so it may be worth checking the IT to make sure it is there.
Yeah, it's only I'll send you a copy. As we, in terms of the other sort of topic papers and so on, as we said the other night, there are a couple of topic papers still sort of being finalised. They'll all be published for Cabinet on Monday. So they're to come. That just explains some of the sort of development strategy and that type of stuff that we've had before. They'll be updated and published on Monday. And then in terms of how much land has been lost, obviously, appreciate what you're saying in terms of the amount of greenfield land, both from the adopted local plan and also, now proposed in the Regulation 19 local plan. It is a significant pressure with the level of housing targets set by central government. Obviously, from our side, we've tried to maximise wherever we can brownfield land through the plan, and there's several sites, including we did the call for sites specifically for brownfield land just last year to try and maximise supply from brownfield to sort of reduce that pressure on greenfield as part of the strategy.
I think this goes back to Councillor Flanagan's point initially of the methodology, though, that if you have a reducing availability of land and you have, like Canterbury does, I think Pippa Haling's MP, one of the Liberal Democrats, was referring the other day to the chalk streams, of which we have one right through our district, and trying to protect those. Obviously, we have some protection already in place for the Stour. We have ancient woodlands with the Bling complex I mentioned. There are others. We have areas of outstanding natural beauty. We have areas where Ramsar sites and so on, which are not suitable for being built on. So when these numbers are created, are those sites taken out? As I thought, they're not taken out. So what you've got when they calculate the size of the district is including all the environmental bits, of which Canterbury has a lot, and then we get a housing allocation based on that area and the population, which is unfair, I think would be a fair assessment of that. It's inaccurate to the needs of the district and the availability of land, and we've got a diminishing amount of land because we can't build on lots of those areas, or there's environmental issues you end up building on, places like Merton Orchards, which clearly caused some anger with the local residents, Bodkin Farm, others. These kind of reducing balance problems are something that can only be addressed at governmental level. It's not something that is in our control, and it's something that perhaps the council really need to take a very, very strong view at to central government. And it's not just this government, but the previous government did the same thing. As it's been going on for quite a while now. So I think it's something that just needs to be addressed at that level, because we're not going to be the only district with this issue, and it will be a raising anger problem with the local residents, which as elected councillors we are somewhat restricted in what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go to Councillor Buckman's points, I think they were made around the mapping. When you look inside the local plan documents, you'll see sort of dispersed through some of the maps, are sort of horrible looking. I don't know why we chose it, but sort of yellowy, orangey sort of colour, which are the carry forward places that are in the current local plan, which will be carried forward because they've not been delivered or currently being delivered. One of the criticisms we had in the previous administration, and I think was valid, was that quite often in the local plan you just show a red line around a site, and quite often people will look at that and go, that whole area is just going to be top to bottom housing. What we tried to do in the newer versions of the local plan is take that a step further and go, obviously we're not expecting every single inch of the area to be full of houses, but it's a bit more complicated than that. There is green space, there are areas which are for residential, there are areas that maybe are for business or for schools or for transport or for community infrastructure. It's obviously not there to go, we're going to draw a dotted line and drop some stuff in there, or the dotted line is going to be a road. It's to try and suggest to developers coming forward, this is how we would expect you to consider it as you move into the planning application phase for stuff. And then Councillor Flanagan at the very beginning said, obviously there's a difference between what a local plan does and what a planning application does, and that is 100% right. It's up for the developer who's going to bring a site forward to go through that and use the outlines within here through, in a sense, master planning to build up what their application looks like. And no single application, you could have 4 developers come forward and 4 of them would have very different interpretations of how to deliver that. It would be for planning committee to look at that and decide how they see that and whether they're acceptable or not. These are merely to try and show that every square inch of space is not to be filled with housing, every square inch of space is to be planned out in the right sort of way. So you're right. They're not there to be a drawing for people to sort of lay over and design from, but they are there to try and illustrate that it's not just to fill up spaces with houses.
Councillor Flanagan.
Thank you, Chair. So back for some more, probably not for the last time as well, I'm afraid. So I'd like to convey some more thoughts on behalf of residents, particularly for the large sites in Chesfield. That's not just the impact on Chesfield, but also on Whitstable as well. And some questions, drawing from some of the speeches that have been made tonight relating to some of those sites. One of the key concerns that's been put to me by residents is the loss of green space. We've just been talking about that, but particularly in this plan, when you think about land south of the Thanet Way, which now has planning permission, of course, land at Golden Hill, move all the way along to Bodkin Farm, which originally, some years ago, I think was designated as Green Gap as well. You know, the concern is that will be lost before we even think about Brooklands Farm. And indeed, it's not in here, but it's got planning permission, has been developed already, Grasmere Gardens in Chesfield as well. So there is a deep concern that whilst we're saying in some places we need to retain open space, the Green Gap and so forth, in actual fact, the concern amongst a lot of residents I've spoken to is that in this stretch in Whitstable, we're doing quite the opposite. Now, on Golden Hill, we had 2 speakers spoke earlier today. Thank you very much for speaking. And I think it was Mr. Barefoot who raised the point about the council's draft housing strategy. As a reminder, Golden Hill, one of the key parts of it is to provide, and I quote from the draft plan, a minimum of 20 traveller pitches with day room facilities. Yet my understanding from the speech is that in the draft housing strategy, that focuses on expanding existing traveller sites and doesn't mention Golden Hill. So my first question is, how is that consistent between the draft housing strategy and the local plan? That's number one. Number two, with relation to Golden Hill, there is a smaller site there, W9, for a very small development. And I think that was the one, correct me if I'm wrong, where there's a bungalow application which is up for appeal at the moment. So I'd like to know how that's considered in terms of that particular site being in the local plan, please. With the time available, so I'll park those questions for Golden Hill at the moment, but with the time available, swinging across to, in particular, to Brooklands and Botkin and back on traffic, because Mr. Slaughter raised this point in his speech, problems at Chesfield Roundabout. The advantage of, in some ways, and maybe a disadvantage, but seeing applications coming in as they are already on Bodkin Farm and Brooklands is that you get the detail coming through, and we've seen the detailed traffic modelling on both sites. But the concern is, whilst this may be different to the local plan, and I've had this conveyed to me by residents, is that the traffic modelling is done in isolation from each other. So let's give you a good example of that. Both pretty much refer to pupils coming from Swalecliffe down the road, Chesfield Road, to schools at Brooklands Farm, or indeed the large secondary school that's been planned for Bodkin Farm. If anybody who's been to that Swalecliffe Railway Bridge looks at the width of the pathway there for children, potentially hundreds of children, to walk under to get to those new schools, it is an incredible safety issue. And I don't know how that gets considered as part of this plan, but that together with the fact, you know, the modelling of the traffic in isolation, problems at Chesfield Roundabout, the fact that KCC Highways, as I said before, have highlighted all these concerns with traffic on Brooklands Farm. I've had residents come to me continuously wanting me to convey their concerns and their questions. How does that stack up if this large site, Brooklands Farm, does end up in the local plan, where we're beginning to see from a planning point of view that the traffic modelling may not work? Lots of questions there. I'm going to pause. I'd like to hear some answers to those, please. And I will be back for more later. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I thought you were going to answer the questions.
Yeah, just in terms of the questions about Gypsy and traveller accommodation. I mean, you're right in terms of obviously it's a difficult type of development to provide for, and we've run, as you know, many Corfa sites over the years, including some looking specifically for Gypsy and traveller provision. And through all that time, we've only ever had these two submissions for Gypsy and traveller provision. We have a fairly high level of need, and so we need to use those sites where they're available. But we didn't just go straight to that. So just joined the dots together with the housing strategy, the draft housing strategy. Obviously, we've had to look at where there are existing sites in the district with that capability to potentially extend or intensify as the first call. So that is the sort of strategy in terms of delivering what is quite a tricky form of supply for development, to maximise those opportunities to intensify existing sites. That does include potentially regularising unauthorised sites at the moment. And then that effectively reduces the residual amount that we need to try and find, and that's where the allocations, the draft allocations, come in the Golden Hill area. So in terms of the small site, just specifically on that, obviously we had that submitted specifically for Gypsy and traveller provision. It sounds as if that an application for a bungalow may have been refused, but we've had that made available for Gypsy and traveller provision. That's why it's included in the plan.
Chair, thank you, Andrew. Can I just quickly come back on that? So are we saying then that whilst the draft housing strategy says we will look to expand on existing sites, is the answer then that the existing sites are not providing the total number that's required, and therefore the increase or the marginal increase is coming through Golden Hill. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That gets us to the total. So in other words, the existing sites are just not providing enough. Is that what we're saying in terms
That's
of
right. There's
the
none
number we need to get
that
to?
the local plan needs to meet to be considered sound at examination.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor.
So I had some questions
Yeah,
on
I'll just
traffic.
answer
Yeah. Sorry.
just the transport modelling one. So part of the evidence base for Reg 19 will include a strategic transport model for all the sites. So it will include all those sites you mentioned in Chesfield. It's a strategic model, so it doesn't go into the micro looking at individual junctions. So I think we need to. So the strategic model gets looked at by KCC. Ultimately, it's KCC who will say yay or nay whether they support these going through. At the moment, they're saying they support all these sites, have the potential to be acceptable in highway terms. If they hadn't accepted that, we wouldn't have got this far. But when it gets to the planning stage, as some of the ones you've mentioned, that's when the detail comes in, and that's when each junction looks at and capacity and safety of pedestrians. And yes, at that point, developments might have to change significantly, or they might have to fail. They might fail if they can't be made to be made safe. But there's obviously there's a disconnect. You're right. The local plan looks at all the sites in their entirety with the strategic model, but that doesn't mean that when it gets to development management stage and the planning stage, that other issues may come to light.
Sorry, Chair, very quickly on that. You mentioned Reg 19 there, Richard. So Reg 19, where we do the detailed strategic study, did I get that right? Did I misunderstand that? Sorry.
The Reg 19 is obviously what we'll be presenting now, which does include the strategic transport model for all the sites. So that when you look at that, that does flag up junctions. That
I was going to say, so Reg 19, if this goes to Reg 19, looking at that part, that could still bring up issues from a, whatever the word is, soundness point of view, or whatever, from the traffic perspective.
But ultimately it's the highway authority who would, when we get to the EIP, the inspector will be looking to the highway authority to say, do you think this is sound from your network capacity?
Yeah.
At the moment, they're saying they think it's got the potential to be acceptable. So we wouldn't have got this far if they'd thrown up any concerns, we wouldn't have got this far.
But that could, in theory, change, right? In detail, yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I'll come back. Thanks.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make no sympathy that I'm a Herne Bay councillor. My ward is Heron Ward. We have built a lot in Herne Bay, a lot of houses. I think there's between 3,000 and 5,000 houses been built. Councillor Stockley and Ian Stockley have fought and to get the best for the residents in Taylor Wimpey and Kitewood sites. We've done the best as local councillors for the golf course site as that went through the previous local plan. The Herne development, Lower Herne, we went through all that and we try and get the best. So I'm kind of on a different frame from my questions more with procedure. Following what Councillor Dan Smith has said, some of this information is going to Cabinet on the 18th, I believe, and then we've got to vote straight off of it. So if Cabinet's got the information that we haven't got until it goes to Cabinet, then we've been asked to vote on something that we haven't got all the information on, and if it's done on the night or a week before, it's not necessarily enough time for us to actually absorb all that information. I mean, I went for a whole day going through the local plan and picking things up that I could see onto that, but you know, the improvements for Herne Bay, great. You know, let's move forward onto all that and as much investment as we can have for Herne Bay. I'm always ready for that. What I wanted to comment on, and I've made some notes on, is on page 132, paragraph 2.33. It says there, sustainable strategy for wildlife. It looks like we have to use the waste management site that we've got Canco on, I presume, at the moment, but it wasn't, was it the other meeting not so long ago, wasn't that going to be used, potentially be used for the Wincheap Park and Ride? And again, I will say it, I think that's in the wrong location. It needs to all go to Dover Road Park and Ride and have one destination point. That's one point into there. We can't use this site twice, so that's one comment. Once this goes out to consultation, what can the residents expect? Any change in this plan, or is what is basically here will be sent to the inspectorate? Also, please can I put on record that I personally have had no input in this local plan. Page 290, the new development should be sustainable, as we've had in Herne Bay. If Stagecoach don't want to play ball because of the cost of all the Stagecoach, if this isn't affordable, then people, when the developments are built, i.e. in the Wincheap development, if the bus first strategy isn't there from day one, people will automatically start using the buses. So the infrastructure will be gridlocked wherever. Because we're voting in this in December 2027, if we didn't have a year's extension, because we're going into the fifth year as councillors when we go to unitary, this would have run out of time to actually be dealt with this council. Surely, if we've got new elected councillors with a unitary, they're not going to be happy with us making the decisions on a local plan, which they've got to pick pieces up. So surely, if they're elected, they're going to put a judicial review, whoever's in charge of that, who's ever in charge of unitary, and this will all be thrown out anyway. That's the comment. And when it comes to the infrastructure on the roads and highways, where's all the money coming from that? It doesn't all come from the developers. So, for an example, we've got the Sturry Relief Road. That some of the money's come from developers, some of it's come from KCC. So all this new gyratory system in Wincheap and traffic lights and taking out roundabouts, that's going to cost. And the residents are going to be paying for something they don't actually want. That's just my comment, and there we go. Thank you, Chair.
Is there any points you need to come back to specifically there? No. Okay. Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start by thanking all the speakers. It is really important to continue to tell us your views, even though this committee is a listening committee, and we're not the decision makers. We are still here to listen. I'd like to thank officers, because this has been a journey. It's been about 5-6 years to get to where we are. And there has been a lot of hard work that has been put in. I'm a rural councillor, so I'm representing my residents of Charterham and Stone Street in rural areas, and I do welcome that the Ashton Street development, the numbers have been taken out on planning grounds, and I think that's the important distinction here, because we're coming to a point where things have to have planning reasons why they shouldn't be kept in. And also, Charterham have a neighbourhood plan, which is also mentioned by one of the speakers about Bridges' neighbourhood plan, and that's really important that that's listened to. But as a rural councillor, I must pull out some of the benefits within this plan and re-ask what could possibly happen if we don't have a local plan. So I'm going to pull out the benefits, and if we don't have a local plan, are those still able to be produced without a plan where developers can put forward lots of proposals? So we've got within there's a sustainable transport strategy. With 2017 local plan, there isn't a fundamental one. There is protection to the rural character, and as a rural councillor, that's important. There are local green space designations, local wildlife sites and habitat networks, landscape character areas and green infrastructure corridors. Will they still be there if there was no local plan? Net zero ready building requirements. There's strengthened sustainable design rules, higher biodiversity gain expectations, 169 hectares of new open spaces and sports pitches, coastal protection zones, net zero carbon ready building standards, bus-led strategy, promotion of walking and cycling, park and ride. So I'm just pulling out a few and representing the residents from my ward who would like to see these benefits. So if we didn't have a local plan, if there was a big amendment or something that was taken out and we'll have to go from day one again, and it took a very, very long time to get here, will we still have those benefits, or what could possibly happen? Thank you.
I suppose just in summary, a lot of those measures you've listed off are not included in the adopted plan, and they're not in the MPPF either. So, you know, if applications come forward while we're in a state of presumption, they're assessed against the National Planning Policy Framework, any policies in the adopted plan that are still considered up to date. So, you know, that there are several areas of sort of more progressive policy within the draft in the Regulation 19 plan compared to the adopted one, which are there to respond to a lot of what we've heard from communities and from stakeholders as we've gone through this very lengthy process. So that there is value added there, and it is only really through a local plan you get to take that coordinated approach to infrastructure, in particular sustainable transport infrastructure, which is just not really achievable or deliverable on a sort of speculative planning application by planning application basis. So there is an opportunity to try and coordinate better with the strategy.
Can I just come back? And I think that's really important to understand that fundamental point, that if we don't have a plan, the benefits that are within that plan get thrown out. Thank you. I think the point is the 5-6 years of what happened to get to where we are. I think there's a 27, am I right in thinking there's a 2017 local plan that has been voted on, and that planning requirements are coming through on that, but there aren't as many protections in there. It took 5 to 6 years to get to where we are now. If the local plan is ripped up, it will take considerably more years to be able to develop that. And in that amount of time, developers can then put forward proposals, planning proposals, and they'll be running from the old local plan, which don't have those protections in. Is that correct? I think that's a concern. Thank you.
Councillor Butcher, I think, was next.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank everybody that comes in tonight. We realise the depth of feeling, and I thank everyone who spoke tonight. We can all speak about what happens in the wards we represent, and that must be. But we must have a vision. The vision has been developed over a number of years and is informed by ongoing consultations with communities and stakeholders. Unfortunately, we can't please all the people all the time, just some of them some of the time. The committee is listening, so I urge you to keep on and be consulting on and but I say our hands are tied, and as was relayed by Leo, the officer, the committee is listening, but we have to have a local plan. So that is my comments for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Old, I think, was next. Sorry, Councillor. Yeah, I see Councillor Dan Smith. But I think I saw Councillor Old's hand first. So I've seen yours as well. Don't worry, Councillor Heaver. Councillor Old.
Thank you, Chair.
So, go on.
I would just remark on the fact that this committee seems set on putting forward recommendations without sight of what an officer has told us quite clearly is a crucial piece of information that we've not had sight of. I just note that. But my main point of raising my hand is to say that I'm going to propose an amendment, and just to preempt any objections from the Joint Chief Executive, the amendment I'm going to propose relates to only 0.4% of the total proposed housing requirement, so can't be said to threaten the integrity or the coherence of the whole plan. But my proposal is that the site C14 is temporarily deferred from the plan until the Office of the Information Commissioner has concluded its formal investigation. Could I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Could you repeat the wording so that Pippa can take it down for the minutes, please?
Site C14, Milton Manor House, is temporarily deferred from consideration as part of the local plan until the Office of the Information Commissioner has concluded its formal investigation of the council.
Peter, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, councillors can put it forward, and as it's been put forward, it should be debated and voted on, given it's been seconded, unless councillor would like to withdraw it. I just want to make clear around the ICO, Information Commissioner Office's role and remit in this. Yes, a complaint has been put forward, but the role of the Information Commissioner is to look at things like freedom of information complaints, environmental information regulation complaints, personal data complaints, subject access request failures, lawfulness, fairness and transparency of data use. What they do not do is review complaints about council decision making or policy merits, poor service or maladministration, or dispute about outcomes such as housing allocations, planning permissions and benefit decisions. They also do not deal with compensation complaints. The body that deals with those would be the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. So any outcome from the ICO would in effect have no impact on whether the site allocation could or could not be included for legal reasons or soundness reasons within the local plan. However, it has been put forward and should be debated.
Chair, if I could. I've been informed that indeed, if the Office of the Information Commissioner were to uphold the complaint, then that might form the basis of a maladministration petition to the Local Government Ombudsman. Thank you.
Yep. So just 2 seconds while we just clarify a few things, but I intend to debate this.
I have a query because I was told under the advice that the local plan was not being able to make any amendments.
Well, it could. You can, but it has to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Councillor Butcher. You're right in the sense that if a amendment was put forward and was carried and Cabinet took on that recommendation and adopted it when it considers as part of its recommendation through to Council, the Office of Advice on the night would be that the Regulation 19 plan would have to be withdrawn because it would not at that point meet the soundness or legal compliance test. So in effect, an amendment would mean that the Regulation 19 would fall, therefore should not be voted on because it would not be sound or legal. However, as you're not a decision-making committee, if your recommendation is that that's an issue that you feel Cabinet should be considering, that's within the gift of the committee to recommend through to Cabinet to consider.
This was from Jan Geiler, the legal representative. No amendments can be made to the regular 19 local plan. A query was raised on the advice given to members by officers at the councillor briefing on the regulation 19 local plan on 25th of February. The advice was that the only options open to councillors in both the upcoming and overview committee and full council are the binary choices of accepting or rejecting the plan as a whole, and that no amendments would be possible at that stage.
Continue reading. You've not quoted it in full.
If question...
Councillor Butcher, would you like me to help out on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that okay, Chair?
I'm not...
Ian, can you turn your mic off?
Oh.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Butcher. Yeah, as it goes down, it basically then says, should councillors wish to amend the plan, in effect they are rejecting it, as we cannot, on the night of the meetings, update the sustainability assessment, consider the findings, consider the implications for the other evidence areas, and then revise the Regulation 19. So in a sense, if even for a small percentage, as Councillor Old points out, it would still have a material effect on those supporting evidence bases. If you carry that tonight, then in effect, this committee is saying that you do not believe that the Regulation 19 plan should be voted on and recommended by Cabinet through to full council on the night.
willing to do that.
Sorry, can I ask, can Councillor Heaver second this, considering that he did declare an interest in this? I'm a bit confused.
I think I was advised that I had privilege, so we could, if it did come up for discussion, which it has, I'd be able to discuss it, which was a big relief to me.
I think, Councillor Heaver, I think you raised it as a sort of voluntary declaration, didn't you, rather than as a... I know it sounds technical, but I'm just trying to think of the best way forward.
I defer to you, Chair, but I was concerned that if it came up for debate in this context, I would sit there stum because I'd had letters from Carter Ruck about a former councillor putting in a land that they owned in order to benefit to the tune of £20 million. And I thought I didn't want to start talking about that given the legal risks of doing so, even though it's a matter of grave concern to lots of residents and really doesn't look great for the optics of this local plan, given all the comments we've had from residents tonight.
Peter.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for the clarification, Councillor Heaver. In that sense, then, given you've made a voluntary declaration that you would not take part in the debate, if that came up, then that would, in effect, mean that you should withdraw from the debate and vote on that amendment.
But after that, I think, Peter, you said that there was privilege, so it wouldn't be an issue. So I'm taking you at your word and accepting that privilege.
Peter.
Yeah, that was to do with defamation and things that you say about the item rather than to do with how you feel about your involvement in the item to date. You just clarified that you said you wouldn't take part in the debate. You would, in your words, stay stum on the item.
I thought I had no alternative but to do that, which is why I raised it. It's getting into semantics, but I thought, well, do I have privilege to talk about it or not? If not, obviously, I don't want to talk about it because I'll get into trouble.
Can I, I'm just going to ask, and I know Councillor there's several people that wanted to come in. Councillor Flanagan wanted to come in. You might have a suggestion?
Yeah, no, sorry, it was just a question, actually. If this amendment is going through and we vote whichever way we want to, does that put us at risk of being predetermined when it comes to the vote on March the 18th for the whole local plan?
No, well, I mean, that's for you to consider, not for me to consider on your behalf. If you still believe you've got an open mind for the council meeting and you'll consider it, should Cabinet, if Cabinet takes your recommendation in, then it would reject the local plan in full anyway, it wouldn't get to council. If Cabinet rejects the proposal from Overview, so long as you all still feel that you've got an open mind and willing to consider why Cabinet rejects that proposal, or recommendation, then you can still debate it and consider it. So, yeah, so long as you retain an open mind, you can vote on something now, but you don't know what Cabinet are going to discuss on the night and whether that would sway you one way or the other, hopefully.
So we could vote on this, but, if questioned, well, I voted for it as advice, but, or whichever way you're going to vote, but we're still open-minded in terms of the next 2 weeks before we get to full council. Is that what we're saying?
It's more if that's what you're saying than what I'm saying. So long as
that's what I'm asking, because I don't.
So long as you remain open-minded and you can say that if it went to a judicial review and in court you could say that hand on heart you were open-minded all the way through to that final vote, then that's for you to say. I can't say it on your behalf.
Okay. We need another seconder if we're going to have that. Is that Councillor Dan Smith seconding that particular motion? Okay, we've got that. Councillor Thomas.
I was just going to ask, if you vote for this, or even if you vote against it, you're showing you're predetermined.
I think we've clarified that as long as you are open. And you're saying you're open-minded and you're clear that you're open-minded. I think that is, I know it sounds tricky, but I think we've had that clarified. And I know why you're asking the question, but I think we've had that clarified. Dan Smith.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And just to kind of support your view on that, I think the issue that's been described is a legal issue which is not relevant. We are not part of that legal decision process. And in effect, it's an advice to the Cabinet that they should not take this part forward at the moment until a legal decision is made. It's not I don't agree with it, or I do agree with it. And I'm certainly open-minded on the development. I think if it probably come through, I would have looked at the facts and made a decision at the time, so in planning, but on this particular site. Thank you.
Peter.
Yeah, again, I think it's just important for the committee to understand that the remit of the ICO and that any decision that the ICO takes is to do with a specific complaint made around FOI process, not around whether a site legally or sound within the inclusion within a draft local plan. The only way that you can do that is through the planning inspectorate. You could ask the local government and ombudsman, social care ombudsman, to consider whether there's been maladministration. That's a separate issue as well. The only person that can really say whether a local plan is sound legal is the planning inspectorate. Once a planning inspectorate have taken that decision, then a body or a person can try and judicial review the decision of the planning inspectorate. That's not the decision of the council. Ultimately, the council would be adopting the decision of the planning inspectorate, which would be then a judicial review of what the planning inspectorate had done. I know all that sounds very complicated, but what it sounds like you're trying to say tonight is that the issue with an FOI request should mean that something should not be included in local plan, and those two things are completely different streams of information, and one does not necessarily lead to the other. And I think it's just got to be made very clear for the committee, because you need to think about the decision you're taking within the information that you have, and I have to give you the correct information for you to be able to make a decision on. You can take the decision you want, but I need that to be based on facts and not on one line of attack.
If I may, Chair, I believe the amendment was to defer it. It wasn't to remove it, to give time for a decision to be made. And also legally, there's a chain, if you like, a chain of causation, that if there's and I think that's also been clarified, that if if a decision is taken where it's upheld, the complaint is upheld, that this may then cause the next body, which is more relevant, to be able to, it would provide justification for them to go forward with their legal action. So part of this is, it's a bit like going through a speed camera at 32 miles an hour. Well, you've broken the law, or the 30-mile limit, but do they take any action? Well, that's for the courts to decide and the police to decide. There's different bodies that would get involved in such a thing down the process. So you do one action which causes a problem, and then the second action that's taken from that problem is done by a different body. So it's in essence, what I'm saying is that this, we need to wait for a decision on this and then see if any action is taken from this. And then once you know that, whether action is taken or not, if it is taken, then we need to wait for the result of that. If it isn't taken, well, we go ahead.
Peter.
I understand both the analogies and what the councillor is trying to say. However, from an officer opinion, I fundamentally disagree with what you are saying is the root cause of this. An FOI, Freedom of Information request, which may have been delivered out of time and a complaint put into the Information Commissioner as to how that was delivered, does not equate to why something is or isn't within the local plan. They're two completely different matters. That's like saying your speeding issue was because you had a bald tyre.
Councillor Brady.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just ask one simple question? Today, when we're looking at C14 Milton Manor House, are there any planning reasons why it shouldn't be in there today? Are there any planning reasons? Because that's what, I mean, I'm going to be voting for or against. Are there any planning reasons why it shouldn't be in?
No, there are no planning reasons why it should be included. It's been through all the same processes as all the other sites, found to be suitable and deliverable and achievable, and therefore recommended by officers for inclusion.
It hasn't been.
Was that a point you wanted to make, Councillor Auld?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Brady, for your kind intervention, which he also shouted out. It hasn't been through the planning committee, so how do we know if there are any valid planning objections?
We're not considering this as a planning application, but we are considering the site as part of the local plan, and they are different things. But we had the answer from the officer with regards to its validity within being presented in the local plan. I know there's different, and I think you and I both sit on planning, so we both understand what goes before a planning committee. So I think that's been cleared up, and I'm satisfied with that. Indeed, yeah. So we're debating this particular motion. Sorry. Yes. So we're debating this particular motion. We've started debating this particular motion. I think everyone who's wanted to speak on this has raised their hand. So I'll go to the vote. So we'll read out the word.
Sorry, Chair, I know this is getting a bit tedious for everyone, but I didn't know we'd started the debate. I thought we were having a debate about whether we're having a debate. So I would like to say something briefly, if I may. We could debate that too. Can I just say something very brief? Taking on board all the officer advice and listening to everybody else, there must be people in the gallery think, what on earth is everybody talking about? I think this is the overview committee, and the fundamental concern isn't planning, it's transparency. And there may be nothing to see here. Goodness knows, let's hope there isn't anything to see here. If I could continue. Thank you. It's an element of transparency, and there's been a lot of public passion about who benefits from this local plan. Have our considerations been taken into account? And if, through the course of time, media reports should appear, I'm speaking as an ex-journalist, revealing that a councillor that used to serve on this council submitted their land for this local plan we're debating tonight, and they will derive financial benefit to the tune of many millions of pounds, and this wasn't entirely transparent and known to the people here, it makes a bit of a farce of the entire arrangements, because why would these people come out at night to deliver all their views and their passionately held views about their community if there isn't confidence that every single regulatory and loophole has been ticked, crossed, and all the rest of it, even if it's unnecessary, even if it has nothing to do with planning, because people need to have confidence in us and need to have confidence in the local plan. So that's what I wanted to say, and I'll shut up now. Thanks.
Okay, we'll begin the debate on that particular. We'll begin the debate on that particular motion. We've had quite a lot of points raised already, and I think that's why people were slightly confused as whether to have a debate or debating the particular motion. Are there any other points people would like to make about this particular motion? Because we are in that debate now.
Not really another point, just to say I completely agree with Councillor Heaver. It's a transparency issue more than anything else. Thank you.
It's a motion to amend, isn't it? Or, yeah, I mean, however you describe it, it's a motion to amend. Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
Peter's going to speak. Yeah.
Apologies. Just to be very clear, and again, I know Councillor Heaver wasn't the councillor this time and may not have access to some of the information, but there was external legal advice and legal checks done on that particular case. There was also both internal and external audits undertaken as the processes. There was a tightening up of processes which have been amended to the Constitution to deal with some of the issues raised, but there was nothing within there that suggested that the former councillor had done anything wrong in the way that it was submitted or dealt with. And again, the ICO issue is to do with FOI issues, not to do with whether that was or wasn't a sound process or sound submission by the former councillor.
Thank you for the clarification. I was aware of that, and I completely accept that. And I'm just very keen that the new investigation is in the public domain. Everybody knows it's happening. Everybody knows it's being taken seriously, and I'm sure it will be, so that everything's transparent and there's nothing to hide, and people can have confidence in us and this process and this local plan.
Okay. No other points. So we will go to a vote on that. And I'm going to read out the wording again, just so everyone's super clear. It's on Pippa's screen.
Do you want me to read it? Because it's a bit...
As it's closer, Pippa's going to read it.
So I have got that it's an amendment to the local plan to say that C14 Milton Manor be temporarily deferred from the plan until the Office of Information Commissioner has concluded its formal investigation of the council. Is that correct? Sorry. So to repeat, should I try one of the others?
You're right. The light's on.
Okay, that it's an amendment to the local plan that C14 Milton Manor be temporarily deferred from the plan until the Office of Information Commissioner has concluded its formal investigation of the council. Two minutes, we're going to do a roll call.
We appear to have the electronic voting working, so we will do the usual way.
Let me just take it off. And then... There we go.
Right. Okay, you can vote now.
I do have it on my screen, but it's not displaying on there. So would you prefer me to do a roll call so you could all see, or do you want me to just read the...
We can read it.
Okay, so that has fallen. It is 3 yes, 5 against, 4 abstentions.
Yeah. Okay, we'll continue with the debate on the substantive debate. Councillor Flanagan.
Groans all around. I'm sorry, but as a councillor, I've got to do my duty and represent my residents. I did learn actually this week that apparently in the corridors of the council, I'm referred to as Columbo, in that I always come back and ask another question. But that's fine by me. I've been called much worse, usually by members of my group. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. So and thank you, Alice. Photo looks similar. Okay. I'd like to come back to raising some of the points that I mentioned before, particularly the sites in my ward, and I have promised my residents that I would raise these genuine concerns in terms, and now I'm going to flip back to, let's begin with Brooklands, points that I haven't made. And I mention these because I hope that my fellow councillors will take them on board and consider them as we move towards the vote in 2 weeks' time. By all means, we're all still open-minded, but these are the concerns that that have been sent my way. Transport and traffic, clearly I've mentioned already what the concern amongst residents for Brooklands Farm is we're building 2 new slip roads on the A299, linking the village of Chesfield. The road that goes through it between that point and Chesfield Road will become incredibly busy with 1,400 more houses. And in particular, the concern amongst residents is those slips will not be built until at least 700 houses are built. So all that construction traffic has to come up and down through the village. A genuine concern. What is also a concern amongst residents is that a large part of this site sits in a floodplain. And we made this very clear in our response to the planning application, for which we could provide a view, clear view, that this Brooklands, right across the middle of it, is flood zone 3, and nearby a number of areas of flood zone 2. There is already localised flooding along Shepherd's Walk and the roads that abut the site, and there is a real deep concern that by building 1,400 houses, plus schools, plus all the facilities that go with it, that will cause that flooding to become even worse indeed. So I put those to you. The other concerns are around wildlife as well, the impact on wildlife such a large development will have, particularly when you have an abundance of wildlife in that area. Kites, bats have been seen there, slow worms, hedgehogs, a whole range and plethora of wildlife, which 1,400 houses will clearly have a major impact upon. And with Brooklands, you know, the concern is that is, amongst residents, that is bolt-on to the existing village. It's bolting on 1,400 houses and that the infrastructure just isn't there to support it. In a similar vein, we have heard this week, again, as I mentioned before, 60 to 70 different, at least different responses on covering this, and Bodkin Farm as well. For Bodkin Farm, which is a smaller site, one of the key questions that has been raised with me, and I'll put this to the officers as well, is that in the previous local plan, I think it was ruled out in terms of green gap. I've had a lot of questions about why that doesn't continue now in this particular local plan. Why are we putting Bodkin Farm back in? And there is a real genuine concern that the loss of that green gap, coupled with the increase in traffic, is just adding further traffic weight, congestion to the A2990, already a single carriageway at that point, and then you're adding in 250, 300 houses, a large secondary school, and in fact, lots of children crossing from one side of the road to the other. I spoke to the developers when they had their exhibition a couple of years ago, and there was no plan to put a footbridge in place across that part of the A2990. Now, these may be planning issues, but it's bringing out the detail now, and that's bringing about the concerns that local residents I represent, Peter represents, have for these sites within the local plan. I hope you consider those. I'm considering them still with very much an open mind, but the point that has consistently been put to me is not only will this impact Chesfield significantly by increasing the housing numbers by over 60%, it's not just Chesfield this will have an impact on. As Councillor Naomi Smith correctly said earlier, it's the wider impact on traffic, sewage impact as well. which many residents do not feel have been adequately considered within this draft local plan. So I convey that to you. Thank you.
Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thanking everybody who came to speak tonight. But what I do notice is the voices that are missing tonight. They're the voices that come to my councillor surgery. The family, parents in their 50s, they've got their children living with them, who've got their children living with them. They're overcrowded. Their children at age 30 have now got a home on shared ownership at Whitstable Heights. Whitstable Heights was also a previous Green councillor said he didn't know anybody who would want to live there, which I found quite shocking at the time. However, there are people. We also got nomination rights on that development as well, which we hadn't had before because Labour pushed that. And we have got people who have locally who are being housed in social housing, who are getting affordable shared ownership. And these are people who are desperate for housing, who often live in overcrowding. So I do think we need to also be aware that voices are not being heard about this. Thank you.
Councillor Bartman.
Thank you, Chair. I might just pick up what Naomi said there about overcrowded, because I mean you can still live in a very overcrowded house and not be recognised on home choice as being overcrowded and not actually get abandoned, and so you are still struggling for space, but because of priority needs, etc., you aren't accepted. And yeah, wages and all sorts of things. But no, so it's just a question really about on UNESCO status and whether that applies to the city, the whole city itself, or just on monuments and buildings, etc. And how UNESCO status is monitored or maintained, sort of, with increased pollution levels and building levels, and because obviously I can take Liverpool as an example of that. But yeah, so I'm just wondering. Obviously, I would guess that the local plan has taken this into account at the start, but as it progresses, obviously you are not going to be 100% sure how pollution could increase, and the building. How does that get monitored? Does that get monitored at each as it gets built out at each stage? Is that part of the planning process further down the line? That's it. Thank you.
Andrew, do you want to come back on those points?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the heritage policies are embedded through the local plan. So there's a really strong policy in the strategic policies chapter that covers heritage, and then where appropriate, it then appears in terms of the site allocation policy. So where there could be potentially an impact or an opportunity to better reveal the universal value of the World Heritage Site. So the World Heritage Site itself is defined in the policies map that's available, and also the buffer around that is also defined. So there's really sort of tight controls about the impact on that development might have, and that needs to be absolutely factored in from the beginning. But it goes beyond that as well. So even at the periphery of the city, there could be potential for impact. So that's where the policies in the plan are absolutely really clear that needs to be considered right from the beginning of any development, and no adverse impact will be acceptable whatsoever. In terms of pollution, I mean, you probably picked up the air quality action plan that we brought through just last year is actually showing improvements in air quality in the districts already, and that's before a lot of the bus strategy stuff is coming through. So I think we'd expect air quality to continue to improve over the period of the plan, and in the next few years, to the point we might actually be able to revoke the air quality management areas over the coming years.
Councillor Dan Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. Moving on to a different subject. The green gaps. It's mentioned in the agenda about the green gaps in the villages, some of which have been improved. Just as an ask to go forwards, I think something for the Cabinet to consider is the way green gaps are, as well as being designated in the local plan, the way they can in future be enhanced and preserved. and I think this goes to one of the speakers, Alan Atkinson, who's actually from Bridge, who's still here, about the green area and the village hall development around Bridge. That the usage of the green areas around villages is actually quite important. And for many villages, the green gaps are important. And where you just designate in a local plan that they are important, that doesn't necessarily gives them some protection, but not necessarily as good protection as they could have. And I know the council will probably be sympathetic to some of these, and some of the parish councils work hard on this in the various different councils. The lesser councils, a bad way to say it, but the next tier of local government. But it would be helpful if sympathy could be given to any other method that could strengthen those gaps. So I think sort of creating them as sort of village green status or this kind of thing is something that can be done. And it's just, whilst that's not necessarily something that we can do, it's a recommendation that council look to enhance them in whatever methods and ways that they can be to add additional strengths to those green gaps, given that many people I think supported all of them. If you tot them all up from all the different ones that are recorded, some of which are between the towns, Herne Bay and Whitstable and so on, it would be helpful to actually try and strengthen them as much as could be done. So, and for obviously villages like Bridge to look sympathetically at their call for support in what they're trying to do there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest just a very few minutes break, because we have been going for an hour and a half, well over an hour and a half actually, since I'm going to suggest 2 minutes stretch of legs for people who would like to, unless people are happy to wrap up, but that's fine too. We are approaching 10 o'clock, so we are getting towards quite a long meeting. Councillor Brady?
Yeah, just a suggestion. Let's have a show of hands if anybody else would like to make any comments. If there aren't any people who'd like to make any more comments, then
I think there's a few that might still want to contribute. I see Councillor Heaver's hand. So, but 2 minutes and then we'll resume. Okay. I'm going to take the last few contributions now, because we are at 10 o'clock, and we are waiting for Councillor Flanagan, who I'm assuming is he was just getting some fresh air. Here he is. He's had his oxygen. He's good. He's good to go. I'm going to take the last few contributions now because we're past 10 o'clock. So final hands, and this really will be the final round because we'll be wrapping up. Councillor Brady. Who was first? Councillor Flanagan, then was Councillor Heaver's hand up as well? Yeah.
Thank you. It was just to follow up on the question that I raised earlier for Bodkin Farm, that in a prior local plan, Bodkin Farm, a question from residents, it was, I think, removed on the basis of green gap. So we've certainly had a lot of questions raised with us about why it's back in the plan and concerns for green gap, please.
Andrew?
No, it's a good question. The green gaps exist in the 2017 adopted local plan, and they are a tough, local restriction on development. Recognised to be quite, really important protections against coalescence between settlements. So we use them fairly sparingly. Obviously, when we're reviewing site submissions for the new local plan, we need to look across the board. And in terms of the corporate sites assessment that we'd undertaken on that, obviously there's a conflict with that existing designation as a green gap. But obviously, that's looking in terms of housing. We have to look broader than that in terms of the wider infrastructure strategy. And it was an ambition from the early stages of the local plan to be able to deliver secondary school capacity at the coast. We know we need more secondary schools, and both KCC and Canterbury wanted to put additional capacity at the coast. So we did a thorough exercise looking for opportunities around the coastal towns to accommodate new secondary school capacity. Obviously, a secondary school site is really large, and it's in excess of 8 hectares, and there aren't really many of those sites available at all. So that's where the green gap, had to be looked at and seriously. And so in the Regulation 19 plan, the provisions are there to release that land purely to provide the land for the secondary school accommodation. So not just for housing, but purely to provide that secondary education capacity that otherwise wouldn't be able to be delivered at the coast.
So that's still the case, even though stats seem to show that population growth, kids coming through, to school admissions and all that seems to be tapering off. Is that still the case?
It is when we're looking forward to 2042, 2043. Yeah, that need will still be there over the full period of the plan.
Okay. Councillor Heaver.
Thank you, Chair. I know we're getting a bit weary, but I thought it was time I'd go a bit parochial and talk about my ward, Whitstable, and to counter Councillor Brady's glossy interpretation of how supportive his residents are. My residents ain't at all supportive of this local plan for a number of reasons. Some I've alluded to already, that there was a water outage last summer and absolutely no indication from South East Water or anything in this local plan to say that's going to anything's going to happen here other than it's going to get worse, a lot worse, partly due to them, partly due to climate change, and partly due to the 2,000 extra houses or 2,050 extra houses we're going to have in the catchment, in addition to the ones that haven't been built out. Like, I don't think the 220 at Seasort Meadows are connected up yet. I think the last time I asked, you couldn't connect up because there wasn't any sewage connection. There certainly isn't any taps connected up yet. Whitstable Heights isn't fully occupied yet. So people are very worried about water in Whitstable water supply. And at the risk of sounding like a stuck record, last month, 169 hours of untreated sewage pumped into a bathing water, a Blue Flag beach and an oyster fishery by Southern Water. That's over 14 days. So you only got a 50-50 chance in February 2026 of actually being able to go in the water that isn't covered in hundreds and hundreds of swimming pools full of human waste. That's the reality of living in Whitstable, a seaside town and a seaside economy, and people are fed up with it, disgusted by it, and tell me about it every single day I walk into town. So they're not impressed with the local plan, and the infrastructure compensation from this local plan for my neck of the woods, the bus-led strategy, well, thanks very much for the park and bus. We don't even get a park and ride. The bus-led strategy is very impressive in places, and there are good things in this local plan, but most of them are focused on Canterbury city centre. The idea that a family is going to come down from London or anywhere else for a nice weekend in Whitstable, drive past Borstal Hill to park on an anonymous stretch of tarmac next to a housing estate on the land opposite Whitstable Heights, stand in the drizzle with their screaming kids with a pushchair and beach ball waiting for a bus that may turn up in order to penetrate the traffic jams of Whitstable is frankly mythical. So we haven't got much in the way of infrastructure delivery. And just to reinforce the point, I've just looked at the infrastructure delivery plan, all 200 pages of it, getting carried away now. And I think page 95 or 96 is South East Water's detailed delivery plan of the infrastructure they're going to build in each part of our district to put our minds at rest that we will have proper water supply, even though we all know we won't. And the confirmed funding for all of these new infrastructure provision is zero. Nothing, zilch, forget it. It all says TBC. So again, I would re-emphasise that if we're going to be voting for this local plan, we're voting for 169 hours of sewage plus going into the sea and ruining our town, and a very good chance that residents once again will not be able to have water coming out of their taps. That's just a fact. So people in Whitstable are not impressed with this. They don't get anything out of this local plan tangible, so they tell me. And the people who have been campaigning so heroically against Save Brooklands, I think Councillor Flanagan's already covered the traffic, but the environmental impact is catastrophic. The one thing I wanted to challenge on the back of that is the idea that there is no choice but to accept this plan, however much our residents don't want it, however much we're worried about the environment, however much we're worried about traffic congestion, however much we're worried about sewage pollution, however much we're confident there won't be any water coming out the taps for our residents. We've got to vote for it anyway. It's our duty to vote for it anyway, because if we don't, number one, it'll somehow be the Wild West. Well, we're already in the Wild West. Littlebourne got passed because we're in presumption. Land south of Planet Way got passed, even though there was massive local objection in my neck of the woods, because we're in presumption. So we'll be in presumption before it, we'll be in presumption after it. And as I asked one council leader, a very experienced council leader in Kent, how bad is it to operate without a local plan? He said there's one thing worse than not having a local plan, that's operating a shit one. Sorry to use foul language, that was his quote. And the last thing I'd say is that Swale have been operating quite successfully without a local plan for some time. So if you think it's a good local plan, by all means vote for it. But don't vote for it if you think it's bad because there's no alternative, because there is.
Thank you, Councillor Heaver. I see Councillor Brady's hand, but I'm just going to say a few words and then I'm going to bring in Councillor Brady, if that's okay. Just taking myself off the chair, speaking as a Barton Ward councillor. We've had lots of contributions from people tonight, I think most of whom have left, actually. But we thank them for their contribution, and we thank them for the time they've taken out of their evenings to come and speak to us. Looking at Barton Ward, it's one of the most deprived areas in parts of the Canterbury district, and if not one of the more deprived areas in Kent. And like other councillors have referred to, there are voices that haven't been heard, and it's really important that those voices are heard. I want to refer in particular to policy C20, which is land at Sussex Avenue, which is on pages 82 and 83 of the local plan document. I'm not going to do a long spiel on this, but I want to make it clear that residents have mentioned that the potential loss of the Spring Lane community centre without a clear replacement for that particular centre is a concern, and that's a concern that's been raised by them to me. There are adjoining sites, the land south and land to the east of Beaksbourne Lane, where community centres or community spaces are planned, but at the moment they are fairly generically referred to. I'd like to see some clarity and an understanding that those sorts of spaces, as I say, in one of the most deprived parts of Canterbury. What's going on? Right, yeah, we're not having any more drumming. In one of the most deprived parts of Canterbury, and just ensuring that those spaces are protected is really, really important. That we don't. It's really important that we provide the housing and the homes that people need for the future. I just want to ensure that these spaces are protected. They are small in the grand scheme of things. The other point I'll make, and I sat on the local plan working group, is that the transport strategy has barely had a mention this evening. And without the transport strategy, none of this hangs together. And I'd really recommend that people take another look at it, whether they're councillors or members of the public. It's crucial to making this work. Yeah, there are lots of concerns about how it will work, but the politics of transport is something that people need to pay greater attention to, and not just about how we move away from car dependency, but how we embrace walking and cycling as well as healthier alternatives where those things are possible. It's never going to be easy, but I just want to draw attention to those positives and those concerns that have been raised by residents. Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Chair. If there's nobody else to speak, then I just propose that we note the report and then ask Cabinet to recognise all of the views that were made today by everybody who spoke.
So we have heard a lot tonight. That will go to Cabinet and then full council. Date of next meeting, 7 p.m, Wednesday the 26th of March. There's no other urgent business to be dealt with in public. We don't need to exclude the press and the public. Meeting closed at